Okay, so let's read more Tatami Galaxy. I like how we're learning more about the main character. Even though it's been over 200 pages, I feel like I'm understanding him a little bit better. So he's really hard on himself. He kind of gets stuck in his ways. Like once he goes in a certain direction, he has a hard time like quitting any clubs, um, realizing, oh, I don't like this, I'm gonna try something new. He just feels like he needs to like go back in time basically and be like, oh, if I just didn't join that club, my life would be perfect. Oh, if I just didn't meet Ozu, my life would be perfect. And so last time we discovered like another good side to him. In the past, you know, we saw him treat a cat really well and like wipe the cat's face and make it clean. And he really likes animals. And Hanuki was drunk, and you know he was tempted to mess around with her, but you know he has pretty good like self-control, I thought. So that was actually pretty admirable. You know, he didn't want to just do things just to do things. He has kind of like a brain to him, so we can see more of his potential. But if he had like, if he could use those brains and the self-control while also maybe being a little more courageous and telling people no, and basically just trying out different things in his life. We saw that he was a little socially anxious, and he did have good like gut instincts when they like joined that cult, like accidentally joined that cult. He knew like pretty right off the bat, you know, something was up. These people are a little too nice, and he picked up that it was a little fakey, and he couldn't understand why exactly until a little later. So I think his biggest issue is his tendency to like badmouth people behind their back, saying, "Oh, Ozu is such a terrible person. Jogasaki is such a terrible person. This and that person is so terrible." To the point where he was gossiping so much about Ozu behind Ozu's back to other people that he just automatically assumed that Ozu did the same thing to him. He thought Ozu was going to talk bad about him behind his back, only to realize that Ozu had very neutral, if not good things to say about him. So I think that's his biggest weakness, and it's the biggest thing that causes me to kind of think of him as not such a good person, where he blames his problems on other people and he badmouths people behind their back. But I think you know he is still young. He's just a college student, so I think he can grow out of that. I mean, hopefully. Not everybody grows out of that, but I'm hoping he does. So let's read some more. That night, Ozu came over, his rude reason being to make sure I hadn't done anything untoward to Kaori. His rude reason. I mean, okay. I mean, I'm glad he hasn't done anything with Kaori either. When are you taking her out of here? Soon, I said soon, Ozu smirked. You whine, but you're actually enjoying life with Kaori, aren't you? You even have her reading 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Shut up this instant. Shut up for the rest of infinity. No, thank you. If I can't blather about pointless shit, I'll die in desolation. So just die then. See, the main character has such a bad attitude. Conversely, as long as I'm blathering about pointless shit, I won't die even if you kill me. Then he told me about an elusive luxury scrub brush with tips of tough, unimaginably fine fibers that form molecular bonds with dirt constituents via the van der Waals force, so it can remove any grime with a light touch. No muscle necessary. Apparently, his master told him to go find one. Nothing that idiotic could possibly exist, I said. No, it really does, but it's no surprise that you've never heard of it. They remove grime so well, soap manufacturers put pressure on the creator, and they aren't sold very widely. At any rate, I have to get my hands on one. You sure are burning out your brain on some stupid nonsense. He has such a bad attitude. Master wants so many different things. It's a lot of work. Mame Mochi from Damachi Futaba or Chirimen Zansho are doable, but then he asks for an antique globe, a banner from that used book fair, seahorses, and giant squid. And if you bring him something that displeases him, you get expelled. Always gotta be on your toes. Ozu seemed oddly amused. Oh, so back when my master wanted a seahorse, I found an aquarium at a garbage dump. Oh, okay. And took it to him. When I tried filling it up, it sprang a furious leak and the water came rushing out, causing a whole scene. The master's whole room was soaked. Okay, so we have read this before where, the main character, he realizes, oh, that's where that leak came from and why the water was like coming into my apartment, because I live right directly underneath your master. Okay, yeah, and his collection of obscene material and his computer was lost. Okay. Oh, and they're still going to the blackout hot party. Okay. Okay, so this part is a little different. So, as Ozu was about to leave, he caught sight of Mochiguma sitting next to the TV. He picked it up and squeezed it to test its squishiness. What are you doing with something this unreasonably cute? He asked. I found it. Can I have it? Why? I want to try putting it in the hot pot later. That's what Ozu did in one of the universes. Wait, are all the universes like converging? Like wherever this bear is? So the bear is connecting all the universes. Like the first universe, Ozu found the bear in the river. And I think in the second universe, what was her name? The girl that starts with an A, Akashi. Akashi like accidentally tripped and she was puking and she caused it to fall into the river. And so Ozu from the first universe found what Akashi like lost in the second universe. And I think also in the second universe, they found the bear in the hot pot. Yeah, so they found the bear in the hot pot in one of the universes, and now we get to see like how it got there. So we'll have to see like where the bear pops up in the fourth universe. Okay, you idiot, you may be able to simmer it, but you can't eat it, I said. Maybe someone will mistake it for mochi and try to... Who would do that? If you don't give it to me, I'll flood the apartment upstairs again. Your library of obscenities will be ruined. Okay, yeah, Ozu's kind of a jerk too. So, but he's not like horribly a jerk, but he's still a jerk when he does stuff like that. Especially when he comes by the apartment, drops off Kaori without even asking, so he's a bit rude. Fine, take it, I relented. Being robbed of one of the few things that brought me peace was upsetting, but I just wanted to get rid of him. Heh. You have my utmost gratitude. No funny business with Kaori now. So, why can't Ozu keep Kaori in his apartment? Shut your trap and get out of here. As soon as Ozu was gone, the fatigue hit like a brick. I prayed to the gods of Shimogamu Shrine that Ozu would choke on Mochiguma and meet a sudden end rich in nuance. The next day, after a full schedule of resistance against my lectures and experiments, I ate mentaiko spaghetti at Cafe Collection for my evening meal. When I exited onto Demachigawa Dori, I looked up at Mount Yoshida, its fresh rising green sprinkling golden in the setting sun's light. I wandered down Imadegawa Dori towards jinkakuji. Sometimes you really do get an evil itch. Between constantly gazing at the doll Ozu had abandoned in my room and having Hanuki press her breasts against me and try to lick my face, though I knew it was pointless, it seemed I'd loosened the strings of my peaceful heart. In other words, it was getting harder to not have a fit of loneliness. I weighed Keiko Higuchi against Kaori. I shut my eyes to the reality that neither of them should have been on the scales to begin with. Both doll and human being may use the kanji for person, but there's a huge difference between the two. I've been an acquaintance of Keiko Higuchi, if only through letters, for half a year already, and with Kaori came the obnoxious issue of Ozu's crime. The scales tipped heavily in Keiko Higuchi's direction. Yeah, I mean, it's better to, develop skills talking to real persons and people than delving into like fakery, basically. Actually, by weighing things out, my heart, previously as calm as the Pacific Ocean, began to sway dramatically. And I know real people, they are more complex and you can't control them. But I think people talking to AI and these dolls, they can't say anything. They have no mind of their own. So I think the draw towards them is just you can project anything you want onto them and kind of live in a fantasy world, which some people can get stuck in, but I think it's healthier to live in reality and deal with real people, even though it's more difficult and takes more skill and more nuance, and just it kind of takes a stronger personality, but you can develop that over time, and to develop it you need to interact with more people. So I think the main character, he's drawn to things like the doll and his collection of obscenities that he says, and he likes to hide away by himself and live in a fantasy world where he can imagine himself to be a good person. But when you deal with reality and when you deal with other people, if it's a real person, they will it's kind of like a tennis match. They'll knock back reality towards you and you'll knock reality back towards them. And through the interactions, it really, really helps you be more honest and true to yourself and be more honest and true about the world and people and how other people work and how you work, even if it's a bit more difficult. So, yeah. So I like how, the theme of this is coming up where the main character is torn between convenience versus doing a bit of work and strengthening his social skills to actually become more human, become more aware of how humans are, and just live in society and know how to deal with society, know how to deal with people. And I think he is learning. He's got both worlds that he's in between right now, and I think he's gonna choose the stronger direction. To get to the point, I ended up going to Keiko Higuchi's house. Oh, even though I was never supposed to meet her. Okay, hopefully he asked for her permission first. He doesn't just show up. Okay, okay. Something just came over me. And if I hadn't gone to her place at that time, if I hadn't confirmed the terrifying true form hidden beneath that veil of mystique, it's clear things would have been taking a turn for the horrific. So it's hard to know which was worse. What happened? Dragged by my yearning for companionship, I reached Shirakawa Dori. A ton of cars crisscrossed at the broad intersection of Shirakawa and Ima Degawa. A chilly evening wind was blowing, exacerbating my loneliness all the more. At the other side of the crosswalk, the philosopher's path. Ooh, philosopher's path. See, I like how the story has like these little nuggets to kind of point you in the right direction of like what this story is actually about. You know, all this stuff is happening, it's all wacky, but you can see a little hint about what the story's about. The philosopher's path stretched into the distance, and the sakura trees, that were all leaves now, no more blossoms, were illuminated by the setting sun's light. I'm just going to see what kind of place she has. It's not as if I'm trying to meet her. That was my awkward defense. He lives in Delulu land. Thus I headed towards a place I had never once approached before, Keiko Higuchi's address at White Garden Jodoji. Oh my gosh, what is she like? Is she gonna be like super weird? Because, you know, the main character, he basically lies to her in the letters about what he's like. And I'll bet maybe she's lying to him too. I went south down Shiwakawa Dori until I found the Jodoji bus stop. Then I went into the neighborhood. Though I had learned her address through exchanging letters, it wasn't as if I'd checked the location on a map. Yeah, totally. So I had to go by my intuition. He totally checked the location on a map. I wandered somewhat aimlessly through the gradually darkening residential area. Some part of me felt it would be better not to find it, so I made a point of not asking for directions. As I walked the quiet streets, I was able to imagine Keiko Higuchi's peaceful way of life, and that alone provided some solace. After walking like that for 30 minutes or so, I began to have second thoughts about my ungentlemanly conduct. Yeah, this isn't a good idea, dude. You should ask first to meet her before you do something like this. Otherwise, you come across as a weird stalker. Yes, it would be better not to find her house. It was almost dark anyway, so I decided to go home. And that was the moment I stumbled upon White Garden Jodoji. It was an unassuming little white apartment building that looked like candy. Comparing it to Shimogamo Yusu Iso was like comparing the moon to a muddy turtle shell. I had found her residence, but I had no idea what to do next. I took a casual glance at the mailboxes, but there was no name tag. The lobby had an automatically locking door, so I couldn't go in, but I could see the first floor hallway where she lived over the wall surrounding the building. Now he's like peering through the windows and like looking over walls. But dude, stop. You need to go home. Her room number was 102, so it must have been the second door on the left side. Staring at the closed door, I started to get the sense I was doing something awfully wrong. Yeah, this is creep behavior, and figured I had better leave before she saw me. But then I remembered that neither of us had ever seen each other before and started to have complicated feelings. As I was wavering incessantly between loneliness and self-hatred, the door to 102 suddenly opened. I tried to hide. I couldn't forsake the chance that suddenly presented itself to me. I saw Keiko Higuchi. She had a very creepy face. She appeared unhealthy with a complexion like, well, how does he know that that's Keiko? It could be like a roommate or like an aunt or her mom. She appeared unhealthy with a complexion like someone who had been living on the far side of the moon. She wore an ominous grin as if she was hoping for misfortune to befall others, essentially like the yokai Nura Rihyon. She was practically like Ozu. She looked identical to him. Actually, it was him. It was Ozu himself. That's so funny. Is there no God or Buddha is a phrase made for this moment. Is it Ozu who's been like writing him letters? Yeah, he did say he's never been to Ozu's place. Does Ozu actually live there? Oh my gosh. I couldn't possibly mistake him. It was Ozu. With no regard for me or my confusion, Ozu leisurely opened the auto-locked door and went outside. He went around to the bike parking area, pulled out his bicycle, which he called Dark Scorpion. Oh, or is Keiko Ozu's girlfriend? Yeah, no, we haven't heard her name yet. Okay, he went around to the bike parking area, pulled out his bicycle, which he called Dark Scorpion, and with a nasty smirk that made it seem like he was scoffing at me, he pedaled off towards Shirakawa Dori. The whole time I trembled, hiding in the shadow of the wall. This was definitely the building White Garden Jodoji Keiko Higuchi lived in, and I didn't have the wrong room number. I didn't want to think about it, but it was possible that Ozu was an acquaintance of hers. Was their relationship so close that he would visit her room? No, I refused to accept such a coincidence. Ozu intimate with the woman I just happened to be pen pals with? The gods were pulling one prank too many if they were connecting people in such a tangled way. So then what other reason could there be? Just then I recalled that I had no idea where Ozu lived. I remembered that this was Jodoji, and I dredged up the conversation I'd had with Hanuki 2 nights ago at the Izakawa Kaya in Hiyamachi. It's over in the Jodoji area, in a fancy building that looks like candy, a little ways off Shirakawa Dori. If what Hanuki had said was correct, that would mean that White Garden Jodoji number 102 was Ozu's room, and I would have to accept the fact that Ozu lived in the same room as Keiko Higuchi. To swallow the bitter conclusion that followed from that would take an extraordinary amount of mental energy. In order to endure this unimaginable bitterness, I wanted a whole case of sugar cubes. Keiko Higuchi didn't exist. For more than 6 months, I'd been writing letters to Ozu. Well, Keiko could live with him, right? I'm not sure. Thus, my correspondence with Keiko Higuchi met its sudden end. No crueler finale could be possible. As night was falling, I staggered back through the city to the university and then headed to Shimogamo Yusu Iso. Looming dark in the twilight, Yusu Iso had a weird aura that seemed to mirror my frayed internal state. He should talk to Ozu about this, confront him. Get some more information. When I opened the door to the building and walked down the hall, something was making a little puffing noise in the darkness. Upon closer inspection, it turned out to be a rice cooker. It looked as though someone was using the outlet in the corridor meant for cleaning to cook their rice. Lacking the space in my heart to forgive even such minor electricity theft, I yanked the plug out of the socket with all my might to ruin someone's dinner, slammed my door, and sat down in my 4.5 mat tatami room. In a corner of my desolate room, Kaori was sitting as usual. I keep forgetting she's there, absorbed in her book. With my dream of life with Hanuki vanished all too soon, and the revelation that Keiko Higuchi didn't even exist, the only option left to me was untalkative Kaori. Oh no. I took out the castella I received from Hanuki as an apology. I confronted the boxy suite in the corner of my 4.5 mat tatami room. I decided it would be best to forget the sensation of Hanuki's breast pressed against me, the numerous letters I'd exchanged with Keiko Higuchi, all of it, and forge on toward a dinner of cake. I didn't even cut it, just chomped right in. This is what you get for not listening to me, scoffed Johnny. Quiet, you. You should have let me handle things at Hanuki's apartment. No, that's not a good idea. At least then you wouldn't have ended up stuck in a little tatami room like this again. That's fine. He can go out and meet new people, other clubs. Yeah, right. Well, now the only option left to you is Kaori here. Where are you going with this? Whoa, are you still trying to keep up the gentleman act after all of this? Isn't it time to give it up? Let's be happy together. I won't ask for anything more. It seems I overestimated you. Apparently, Johnny was scheming to engage in some inappropriate behavior with regard to Kaori, and I grew frantic to stop his rampage. If I took the easy way out here, then the honor I went so far as to hole up in Hanuki's bathroom to protect would be vaporized. If I took advantage of the fact that Kaori couldn't move to have my way with her like the feudal lord in a period piece and be like, "You're fine with it, right?" there would be no maintaining my pride. Johnny and I remained locked in a tug of war while Kaori quietly continued reading. You drive me up the wall, Johnny finally said, no longer caring what happened. It's not me, it's Ozu, I groaned, and continued to eat the castella by myself. As I chowed down on the cake, I realized that eating an entire castella alone in silence could only exacerbate my hell of isolation, and as I chewed, my face took on the grimace of a demon. Anger rapidly filled my heart. Ozu, you fucker. Come to think of it, between Hanuki and Keiko Higuchi, could it be that I was just dancing in the palm of his hand? That rotten yokai. What's so fun about that is probably a stupid question. I refused to do something so worthless as measure Ozu's behavioral principles using my own yardstick. He was just that sort of man. He was a man who fueled himself on other people's misfortunes. Actually, he must have relished many a fantastic meal with me as the main course over the past 2 years. I'd had a vague idea before, but now I understood clearly. He was a man who deserved to die. Oh my gosh. I mean, I know he's really rude and kind of a trickster, but deserved to die. I would put him through a coffee grinder. Gee, just as I had made up my mind, my ceiling started shaking. There was a racket going on in Ozu's master room above mine. I could hear voices arguing. Someone was stamping their feet. My broken light blinked and swayed. A moth flew out, and the room grew brighter and darker. It was like being in a storm. Thus, mentally wandering my desolate 4.5 mat tatami room, I shouted curses at Ozu. Damn it all, what a dark, hectic 4 days these have been. You probably think I'll cry. How stupid. Who would cry? There are plenty of reasons I want to, but I'm not going to cry until I pulverize Ozu. Oh, Johnny, I'm going to lose it. At any rate, there's nothing you can do at this point. This is what you get for calling me an idiot and putting on gentlemanly airs. You can't say shit to me anymore. It's just you and me in this 4.5 mat tatami world forever, for the rest of eternity, said Johnny, who would never leave me. In a 4.5 mat tatami room, the clever ones and the idiots both end up miserable. I agree with you there. What a wretched pair. Then who cares if it's fake? Why don't we let Kaori cheer us up, Johnny argued, as if he'd seen his opening. I looked at Kaori leaning against the bookcase, reading 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Her black hair was smooth, and her clear eyes looked directly at the pages. Love may come in all shapes, but anyone who wanders into such a closed-off maze of love would never be able to find their way back out, especially someone clumsy like me. Would you really be okay with succumbing to Johnny's whispers and Kaori's silent profile and hurling away what little honor you have? Battered by the dizzying storm of self-interrogation, I reached out my hand and tried touching Kaori's hair. Just then, I heard one of the people who had been banging around rattly upstairs came down. I assumed they would leave Yusu Iso, but instead they headed down the hall towards my room. The moment I was thinking, oh, what's this? My door was kicked down. You! Is it Chogasaki? A man mad with rage stepped in. I figured this out after the fact, but the man was none other than Kaori's owner. Yep, one Jogasaki who was fighting the mysterious masochistic proxy war against Ozu's master. The two of us, who should have been putting up a united front against Ozu, met there for the first time, not with a congenial handshake, but with a sparks-flying fist fight. Since I didn't find it very sporting to resort to brute strength, it would be more accurate to describe it a one-sided beating. Without knowing what it was even about, I was knocked into a corner of my 4.5 mat tatami room, and the impact shook my favorite Maneki Neko figurine off my TV. Johnny, who until that moment ago had been squirming restlessly in Kaori's direction, emitted a childish eek and took cover. Even my own boy is so fast when making an escape. Behind the man standing imposingly before me, the yukata-clad fellow Ozu called his master strolled leisurely in. Shoving him aside to rush breathlessly in was a woman. I thought I had seen her somewhere before, but I couldn't remember who she was. Jogasaki, she said. Punching him out of nowhere is a bit much. She helped me up. Are you all right? I'm sorry. There's been a slight misunderstanding. I couldn't think of any reason I deserved the uncivilized treatment of getting my door kicked in and a fist visited upon my face. I finally got up, and the girl pressed a moistened cloth to my jaw. She picked up the maneki neko that had fallen off my TV and said, Sorry to barge in on you like this. My name's Akashi. Jogasaki, this is a fundamental misunderstanding, said Ozu's master in a relaxed tone. Didn't he play some part in this? Jogasaki looked suspicious. No, Ozu just mixed him up in it, said Akashi. Sorry, man, Jogasaki apologized to me, but immediately turned to Kaori. Seeing her safe seemed to calm him down. He reached out a hand and stroked her hair as if she were his daughter or something. If I had done anything inappropriate, the thought alone was terrifying. I think Jogasaki would have blown a gasket and, swept up in his rage, wrapped me in a bamboo mat and drowned me in the Kamo River. While Jogasaki and Kaori were having their touching reunion, Ozu's master sat in my chair as if it were his own and leisurely puffed on a cigar. He seemed to have no intention of explaining things to me. I was completely out of the loop. Would you be willing to just chalk this up to Ozu going out of control, said Ozu's master. I didn't mean for him to go this far. Well, Kaori has come back safely, so yeah, we can end things here. But I'm going to give Ozu a talking to. He broke the law to get into my room, Jogasaki stated sternly. An anger no less virulent than his surged within me too. I'm sure Ozu will be here any moment. You can steam him or boil him, whichever you like. Not that he'd be tasty no matter how you cook him, Ozu's master commented recklessly. Yes, Ozu's the one who caused all this. He needs to learn his lesson, said Akashi. Once I grasped the situation, I seethed anew at him, and with Jogasaki, who had been so wronged, right in front of me, my anger grew richer and deeper. Oh, if it isn't some Costella. Ozu's master had spotted the cake I'd been chomping to pieces all alone. He seemed to want some, and when I found a spot I hadn't bitten into and cut a slice to present to him, he crammed it into his mouth. Jogasaki glared at the master eating cake. I've got to admit, though, this is wild. I thought for sure he had defected to my side. That's naive. Do you really think Ozu is so simple? His master chuckled with a smile and stood up. Now then, I think I'll return to my room for a moment. I wonder how I can get Kaori home, said Jogasaki. Ozu said he borrowed a car from someone, said Akashi. Yeesh, that guy. Sorry, but could I leave her here until I can arrange a pickup? I'll be back sometime tonight for sure, Jogasaki asked with an apologetic bow. I nodded. Ozu's master was the first one to step into the hall. He was gazing towards the building's entryway, smoking his cigar, when he exclaimed, Oh ho! He continued with a beckoning gesture. If it isn't Ozu, come this way, right this way. Jogasaki and I stood up almost exactly the same time and clenched our fists to pulverize Ozu the second he set foot into the room. Master, what are you doing in a filthy place like this? Said Ozu as he peered into my room. The moment he saw the pair of us standing there swollen with rage, he turned on his heel and dashed down the hall. His flight instinct must have detected the crisis he was in right away. As he ran, he ended up kicking the rice cooker I had unplugged earlier. It bumped and banged loudly as it careened down the hall. Sorry, 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 he shouted as he fled. If he was going to have to apologize, he shouldn't have done it in the first place. You bastard, Jogasaki and I went after him with a roar. Akashi and Ozu's master followed us. Ozu was unrivaled when it came to one thing, and that was the speed at which he could run away. He skittered through Shimogamu Izumikawacho like a yokai. I ran with all my might, but Jogasaki pulled farther and farther ahead. About the time I had passed the light thrown by Shimogamu Saruo that was heading towards Demachiyanagi Station, I was this close to a white-hot burnout. Akashi caught up to me on a bicycle. Let's pincer him on Kamo Ohashi. Go around to the west end. With that level-headed remark, she sped off with a huge squeak honk to get around Ozu. I found myself rather taken by her receding figure. Oh, he seems to like her in like every universe. Suppressing the urge to collapse to the ground and commend myself for getting as far as I did, I reached Aoi Park. Jogasaki and Ozu seemed to have already gone around to Kawabata Dori. I went west around Demachibashi Bridge right in front of the Kamo River Delta and then ran south along the Kamo River's embankment. Then I ran up to the western edge of Kamo Ohashi. The area was submerged in indigo twilight by this time. The Kamo River Delta was occupied by lively college kids. They must have been having new student welcome parties. Come to think of it, I'd spent 2 years completely removed from that scene. The river was running high from the rain that had lasted until just the other day, and it rushed noisily past, and the lights reflecting here and there. The surface of the water looked like a sheet of metallic paper being waved like a stage prop. Imadegawa Dori was busy, and the bridge was packed with brilliant head and tail lights. The orange lights affixed at intervals along the bridge's thick railing shone with a hazy, mystical air in the darkness. Kamo Ohashi felt larger than usual on this night. As I walked, panting, over the bridge, Ozu came running from the other side. Akashi must have successfully lured him onto the bridge. Being able to take him down brought me immense satisfaction. Ozu, I spread my arms wide and shouted, and he stopped with a wry smile. Jogasaki came onto Kamo Ohashi from the east side, but he was also half dead. Akashi showed up with him. Where I cornered Ozu was about the middle of the bridge, and the Kamo River was flowing by directly below. Glancing south, farther down the dark river's course, I saw the distant Shijo neighborhood's lights gleaming like jewels. Help me out, we're friends, aren't we? Ozu said, pressing his palms together. Thank you for all the letters, Keiko Higuchi. What fun we had, I said. For a second, he looked as if he didn't know what I was talking about, but he realized soon enough. I didn't mean any harm. So it was Ozu, he said. I never meant any harm. You toyed with my innocent emotions. There's no point in arguing. I'm gonna smack you dead. Smack me, sure, but dead? Why would you do such a horrible thing? That was when Jogasaki and Akashi caught up to us. Ozu, we need to talk, Jogasaki said solemnly. Though Ozu was completely trapped, he put on an invincible smile. No sooner had he laid a hand on the railing than he jumped nimbly up on top of it. The light from the lamps on the bridge illuminated his face from below, giving him a spookier air than most I'd seen in recent years. He seemed about ready to escape by flying into the sky like a tengu. Keep threatening me and I'll jump, Ozu said, which made no sense. If you don't guarantee my safety, I'm not coming down there. Do you really think you're in a position to request safety, you numbskull, I said. Think about what you've done, Jogasaki added. Akashi, please say something. Stick up for your senior disciple, Ozu implored her in a syrupy voice, but Akashi shrugged her shoulders. What you did is indefensible. I love that you're so blunt, Ozu said. Flattery will get you nowhere. Ozu slid his feet to the edge of the railing. He spread his arms as if he was going to take off into the night sky. Whatever, I'm gonna jump, he wailed. Fine, jump then. Jump right now, I said. Go ahead and get swept up in the muddy flow of the Kamo River. Then I would finally get some peace and quiet. There's no way you're jumping, taunted Jogasaki. Not when you're so precious about yourself. What? I'll show you, Ozu declared, but despite the declaration, he wasn't jumping. As the argument continued, a shriek shot up from the Kamo River Delta north of the bridge. The partying kids had begun running around in a panic. Oh, here comes the moths. What's that? Ozu said, bending over slightly with a puzzled look on his face. Without thinking, I pressed up against the railing to look. Something like a black fog. Okay, here comes the moths. Black fog, flapping. Okay, they're realizing that it's moths. Okay, yep, and Akashi freaks out. Okay, it doesn't go through the whole thing, does it? Oh, a news item. Okay, is this right? Did we read this one too? Yeah, the rumors and the moths that seem to strangely come from the area around his apartment. And yep, his door was half open. So we have read all this before in a previous universe. And we read this one where he's protecting Akashi from the moths. Yep, and she's freaking out. Are there any on me? Are there any on me? So we read this before. Okay, I think this is new where, Jogasaki is there with them. So I will, okay, so the swarm of moths became a black carpet again and went down the river to Shijo. I noticed Jogasaki was standing next to me. The moth stuck and flailing in his hairdo didn't seem to faze him. I looked around Kamo Ohashi with its orangey lamps at fixed intervals. It was as if Ozu had made a magnificent flying exit on the wings of the swarm of moths. He had vanished from where he had been standing. He really fell, murmured Jogasaki before he ran to the railing. Jogasaki and I ran to the bank from the western end from the bridge. Before our eyes, from left to right, roared the Kamo River. Since it was running high, areas that were usually underbrush were submerged, so it was wider than usual. We entered the water from there and approached the area beneath the bridge. Something wriggled in the shadows by the foot of the bridge. Ozu was clinging to it like a piece of litter. Apparently unable to move, the water wasn't deep, but the current was fast, and Jogasaki got his feet swept out from under him and was nearly washed away. It took a lot of effort, but we finally reached the Ozu-like thing. You idiot, I screamed, getting doused in the spray of the river, and Ozu wheezed with a half-crying laughter. Take pity and forgive me. Whatever, just shut it, said Jogasaki. Yes, sir, for some reason my right leg is in terrible pain, Ozu confessed. With Jogasaki's help, I lifted Ozu up. Ow, 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 be more gentle, please, Ozu made extravagant demands as we carried him to dry land. Akashi had come down to the riverbed after us. The shock of being buffeted by the swarm of moths had left her pale, but she had called an ambulance without missing a beat. After calling the emergency number, she sat on the bench with her hands over her pale cheeks. We rolled Ozu like a log and shivered as our clothes dried. It hurts, it really hurts. Do something, he moaned. Nah, quit your whining. It's your fault for climbing up on the railing, I said. The ambulance will be here soon, so just deal till then. I could see that Jogasaki, kneeling next to whining Ozu, was struggling with what to do with his anger. And even I didn't have the heart to take Ozu and his broken leg back to Shimogamo Yusu Iso to put him through the coffee grinder. Eventually, Ozu's master alighted on the river bend. He must have walked at a leisurely pace from Shimogamo Yusu Iso. Sheesh, I was wondering where you were, he said. Ozu's hurt, Higuchi. His leg is broken, said Jogasaki. Pathetic wretch. But master, this was all for your sake. You're quite a promising disciple, Ozu, said Ozu's master. Thank you, master. But you're supposed to work to the bone for your master, not break it. You're an incorrigible idiot. Ozu cried softly. It took about 5 minutes for the ambulance to arrive at the end of Kamo Ohashi. Jogasaki ran up to the bank and came down with the medical techs. The techs wrapped Ozu in a blanket and loaded him onto a stretcher with skills pros could be proud of. It would have been hilarious if they had just thrown him into the river like that, but emergency workers are admirable individuals who sympathize with all injured people equally. Ozu was packed onto the ambulance with a gravity disproportionate to his nasty ways. I'll go with Ozu, said his master as he leisurely boarded the ambulance. A moment later, it was driven away. Jogasaki seemed to have already forgotten about Ozu and left the riverbed saying he was going to procure a car to use to pick up Kaori. The only ones left were Akashi on the bench, holding her pale face, and me sopping wet. Are you okay? I asked Akashi. I really can't handle moths, she groaned, still seated on the bench. Why don't we get some tea or something to calm down? I suggested. It's not as if I was thinking anything so rude as stooping to using her weakness against moths to my advantage. Seeing her so pale, I was offering out of concern. I walked to the nearest vending machine and bought 2 hot coffees, which we drank together. She gradually relaxed. I told her about my fatal bond with Ozu, and I told her about his evil doings I discovered in the past few days. I mentioned the name of the fictional maiden Keiko Higuchi and said that Ozu deserved to die for the crime of toying with my heart, but then Akashi suddenly apologized. I'm sorry, I'm really sorry, but I think I'm partly to blame. I've been writing the letters because Ozu asked me to. It was Akashi. What? I read the book you recommended. Oh, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. A pleasant smile appeared on her face. Your letters were good. It seemed like you told a lot of lies, but they were well written. You could tell? Of course, I was lying too, so we're even, she said. Oh, it's so weird, but so cute. Then with a smile on her still pale cheeks, she said something I never imagined I would hear. We met at the Shimogamo Shrine Used Book Fair. Do you remember? It happened the previous summer at the Shimogamo Shrine Used Book Fair. Okay, did we read this already? Yeah, he was at the bookstore. The book fair. I'll read it anyway. Okay, it happened the previous summer at the Shimogamo Shrine Used Book Fair. The riding grounds stretching north to south along the approach to the shrine were crammed full of sellers' tents, and tons of people were strolling around the hunt for books. It was only a short walk from Shimogamo Yusu-Iso, so I attended practically every day. After basking in the charms of summer to my heart's content, drinking a ramoon in the sunlight filtered through the treetops, I strolled among the bookseller stalls on either side, browsing as I went. No matter where I looked, I saw wooden shelves packed with books. It made me a little dizzy. On the cloth-covered benches set up in rows, people who must have gotten book fair sick like me hung their heads. I had sat down too dazed. It was August, which meant it was muggy and hot, so I wiped my sweat off my forehead with a handkerchief. Straight ahead was a used bookshop Gabi Shobo's stall. Sitting in the folding chair at the entrance was a woman with her intellectual brow furrowed. I rose from the bench, and when I made eye contact with her while looking through Gabi Shobo's stacks, she bowed her head slightly. I bought 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne. I was walking away afterward when she got up and came after me. Here, you can use this, she said, handing me a paper fan with the words Summer Book Fair printed on it. That was Akashi. I remembered fanning my sweaty face as I left Tadasu no Mori carrying 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Jogasaki came over that night to pick up Kaori and resume his tranquil love life. From what Ozu told me, Jogasaki was also very popular with human women and had racked up experience as the interest took him while in the club. Given his looks, it's no surprise. What I don't understand is why someone who has no lack of relationships with a real one would be so attached to Kaori. He had been living with her for 2 years. He's hardcore. There's meaning in living alongside a doll you care for. Owning a love doll is entirely different from dating a woman. A barbarian like you, who only sees them as tools for sexual gratification, probably can't understand, but what we're dealing with is a highly evolved form of love. That was Ozu's take. For my 4 days living with her, I had the feeling I understand, but I realize it's not a realm a clumsy guy like me should go stepping into. Yes, I'll choose a human black-haired maiden, like Akashi, for example. Oh! Ozu's master continues to live on the 2nd floor of Shimogamo Yusu-Iso, so I run into him sometimes. He wears that navy yukata and lives a quiet, leisurely life. Akashi continues to visit him. He is somewhat admirable, keyword somewhat, but still, was her appraisal. He said to me, "Why don't you become a disciple too?" So I'm considering it. My first reservation is that I have no idea what I'd be a disciple of. My second reservation is that I'd be Ozu's junior. The other day I had a hot pot at Higuchi's and saw Hanuki. "Small world," she said. I don't know the details of the fight between Higuchi and Jogasaki that led to the plot to abduct Kaori, but stealing Kaori was deemed a rule violation. While Ozu was in the hospital, Akashi took over Ozu's role with aplomb and rebuilt Jogasaki's bicycle into a Quinn cycle in a single night. Okay, so I'm guessing he took the bicycle with 2 wheels and turned it into a Quinn cycle with 4 wheels. Oh no, Quinn is 5, isn't it? What? Okay, cause Quat is 4 and Quinn is 5. Oh, okay, that's a little confusing. Anyway, following those events, Akashi and I grew closer. So considering the outcome, Ozu's evil deeds had a silver lining. Not that that means I'm interested in forgiving him. All I got out of it was something else to talk about at English school, so it was totally not worth it. But I'm sure my classmates will give me a round of applause for delivering this most recent development. How my relationship with Akashi developed after, that is a deviation. Okay, he gets, this is the same. He gets a little shy. He doesn't want to talk about his relationship, even though we still want the details. He's like, oh no, I'm not going to divulge the details. Okay. It's not fair for you to assume that I naively approve of my past just because there have been some new developments in my student life lately. I'm not the kind of man who would go so readily affirm his past mistakes. Certainly I considered giving myself a big loving embrace, but regardless of how it would go with a black-haired maiden of tender age, who would have any interest in hugging a mess of a 20-something guy? Driven by that inescapable anger, I firmly refused to give my past self salvation. I can't shake, but the past self, it got you where you are now. It's all a learning. It's all a learning curve. It's stuff we all go through. I can't shake the feeling that I never should have signed up for the mellow softball. Okay, here he goes. A softball club at the foot of that fateful clock tower. I think about what could have happened if I had chosen something else. If I had chosen the film club, Ablutions, or answered that bizarre ad for a disciple. Or if I had joined that underground organization, Lucky Cat Chinese Food, I would have had a very different couple of years. At least it's clear that I wouldn't be as warped as I am now. See, I don't know if he's warped. He's shown more good sides to him and self-control in this universe. So, I mean, he does have his bad sides, but he also has his good sides too. I might have attained that elusive treasure, a rose-colored campus life. No matter how I try to avert my eyes, I can't deny the fact that the past 2 years have been utterly wasted on a pile of mistakes. Oh, but the next 2 years can be even better. More than anything, the stain of having met Ozu is sure to linger for the rest of my days. Ozu stayed in the hospital next to the school for a little while. I have to say, it felt pretty great to see him strapped into a crisp white bed. He always had such a horrible complexion that he looked like a patient with an untreatable illness, but it was just a broken bone. I suppose it's lucky that he got away with just a broken bone. He grumbled that he wasn't able to perpetrate any of the misdeeds he preferred over three square meals a day, but I just thought, that's what you get. When his grumbles got to be too much, I crammed the Castella I bought him into his mouth to shut him up. So now you've learned your lesson and can quit meddling in other people's business, right? I said with my mouth full of Castella, but Ozu shook his head. No, thank you. I mean, what else do I have to do? This guy was rotten straight to the core. What was so fun about toying with me in my innocence? I grilled him. Ozu put on his usual yokai grin and laughed his head off. It's my love language. Gross. You can spare me, I replied. All right, here comes part 4, the last part. So I'm assuming he's gonna join the Lucky Cat Chinese Food Club, whatever that is. Okay, around the Tatami Galaxy in 80 days. Okay, so this is all the same. I've accomplished absolutely nothing during the first 2 years. Okay, I'm just checking. Yep, I'm just checking that everything's the same. Yep. Okay. Okay, the spring I became a junior, I was living holed up in my 4.5 mat tatami room. It wasn't as if I felt out of steam after the rush of the new semester starting, and it wasn't as if I was frightened of society. I was shut up in my room, cut off from the outside world in order to re-temper myself in a tranquil environment. Having wasted 2 years smearing my future with mud, I didn't have enough credits. Heading ambiguously into my 3rd year, the university had nothing for me. I believed that all of my rigorous austerities had to be performed on these 4.5 mat tatami mats. Shuji Terayama once famously said, "Throw away your books, rally in the streets." But what I thought at the time was rally in the streets for what exactly? I'm writing this record to ponder the existence of 4.5 mat tatami rooms, something most people have zero need to think about. My reason is that recently, by bizarre chance, I got stuck traversing an endless series of 4.5 mat tatami rooms and was forced to think about them so much I wanted to jump from the Kagon waterfall. I'm terribly fond of 4.5 mat tatami rooms and have been known in some circles as a 4.5 mat tatamiist. Everywhere I went, no one failed to pay their respects. Everyone cast he's still in Delulu land. Everyone cast admiring gazes my way. There's the 4.5 mat tatamiist everyone's talking about. Black-haired maidens would whisper to each other. Oh my, now that you mention it, he does have a noble air about him. But there comes a time when even a 4.5 mat tatamiist like me has to step outside. What would drive a man who has such an enthusiasm for 4.5 mat tatami rooms to such a measure? I'm about to tell you. See, this is so cute. Like, you get the very clear impression that, you know, he is being a shut-in, but he's basically saying, oh no, I'm not a shut-in. People are like talking like in whispers about how amazing I am, about how I'm so enthusiastic about, you know, tatami mats. It's so cute. Pretty much the only character in this record is me. Oh, is he gonna be a total shut-in and not meet Ozu at all? Though it's terribly depressing, I really am basically the only one. Okay, interesting. So things are a little different. It was the end of May in my junior year. My base of operations was a room at Shimogamo Yusu Iso in Shimogamo Izumi Mikawacho. From what I had heard, it had been standing there since, okay, and it talks about how kind of dilapidated and how abandoned it looks. So that's the same, and it's like so old. It's like important cultural property level. Okay, I'll never forget. It was the night before I left on that journey. I was sulking alone in my room, Shimogamo Yusu Iso number 110, when Ozu came to visit. Okay, so Ozu's still in here. I'd had a fatal bond with Ozu ever since we met as freshmen. After washing my hands of the secret organization Lucky Cat Chinese Food, I was maintaining my solitary status, and the only person I had kept in touch with for any length of time was this rotten hack yokai of a man. Though I loathed how he polluted my soul, I couldn't cut him off. Ozu frequented the lodgings of one Seitaro Higuchi, who lived above me, and called him master, and every time he stopped by there, he poked his head into my room. Gloomy as usual, he said, "You don't have a girlfriend, you don't go to school, you don't have any friends. What the hell are you trying to accomplish? You better watch your mouth or I'm gonna smack you dead." Smack me, sure, but dead? Why would you do such a horrible thing? Ozu grinned. Actually, you were out 2 nights ago, right? I came all the way here for nothing. Yeah, I did go out the other night. I was applying myself to my studies at a manga cafe. I wanted to introduce you to this girl, Cowrie. I brought her over, but you weren't here, so I took her elsewhere. Sucks for you. On your introduction, I'll pass. There, don't get too down on yourself. Here, I'll give you this. What is it? I asked. Castella. I got a bunch from Master Higuchi, so I'm sharing. Huh, it's not every day I get a gift from you. Well, it's because cutting up a huge castella and eating it alone is the far reaches of solitude. I want you to get a good taste of loneliness, Ozu said. Oh, that's what you're up to? Sure, I'll taste it. I'll keep tasting it till I'm damned well sick of it. By the way, I heard from Hanuki that you went to the dentist? Yeah, I had a thing. So you did have a cavity? No, a more profound infection, I said. Liar. Hanuki was like, only an idiot leaves a toothache for that long. Half of your wisdom tooth was gone, right? Ozu still belonged to Lucky Cat Chinese Food, the secret organization I had fled, and now he was ruling from on high. On top of that, he hinted that he was involved in all sorts of other things. Most would hope that he would make his energy useful for society and the world at large, but he said that the moment he considered the world or society, his joints quit working. How were you raised that you ended up like this? I asked him. It's another pearl of wisdom from my master. What does he teach you? I can't explain it in just a word or two. It's too profound, Ozu said with a yawn. Oh, so back when my master wanted a seahorse, I found an aquarium at a garbage dump and took it to him. When I tried filling it up, it sprang a furious leak and the water came rushing out, causing a whole scene. The master's whole room was soaked. Wait, what number is your master's room? It's the one directly above this. I flew into a rage. Previously, while I was away, there had been a flood on the second floor. When I got home, the water had dripped down to make all of my precious documents, both obscene and not, soggy. But that wasn't the only damage I suffered. All my precious data, both obscene and not, was lost from my waterlogged computer, vanished into the electron sea. It goes without saying that this incident hastened the decay of my academic life. I thought I would complain, but getting involved with this unknown upstairs resident seemed like a pain, so I had left the matter unresolved. That was your doing? So your library of obscenities got a little wet. That's not such a big loss, is it? Ozu said impudently. Just get out already. I have shit to do. That I shall. We're doing a blackout hot pot party at Master Higuchi's tonight. Kicking Ozu and his smirk into the hallway, I finally achieved some calm. Then I recalled the events of the spring of my freshman year. At the time, I was as fresh as a daisy man. Okay, this is the same, new students, getting flyers, he lists off all the clubs, all the 4 clubs that were options to him. Okay, after my classes were over, I headed to the clock tower. All kinds of clubs were meeting there to take new students to orientations. The area around the clock was bustling with freshmen, cheeks flushed with hope and welcoming committee members ready to prey on them. It seemed to me that there were innumerable entryways leading to that elusive prize, a rose-colored campus life, and I walked among them half in a daze. That was where I encountered the secret organization, Lucky Cat Chinese Food. It's not as if a secret organization writer writes secret organization in big letters on its flyer. Don't be alarmed. I learned about the secret part after the fact. The one who approached me at the clock tower was an executive in one of Lucky Cat Chinese Food's sub-orgs, the library police. Oh, it's the library police by the name of Aijima. Oh, Aijima is part of the library police. He seemed very sharp and his eyes were chilly behind his glasses. His demeanor was mild, but I somehow got the impression that his politeness was only superficial. You get to associate with all kinds of people. Makes life more interesting. Aijima had invited me into the law faculty's courtyard in order to persuade me to join. I thought about it. It was true that I lived in a small world. While you're in college, it's important to interact with all the people milling about on campus and learn things, and the experiences you accumulate will prepare you for a shining future. Of course, I didn't only think about serious stuff like that. I can't deny the mysterious atmosphere of the organization held some sort of fascination for me. Have I mentioned that I was an incorrigible idiot? What was Lucky Cat Chinese food? Its purpose was shrouded in mystery. Actually, I'll just say it. It probably didn't have one. Lucky Cat Chinese food was an ambiguous umbrella term gathering multiple sub-organizations. I could list all of them and what they did, but they were all sorts of things you would have a hard time believing, even just the main ones, which included the printing office. Oh, it's all connecting, which put superior students under what amounted to house arrest and forced them to write mountains of papers for other people. The library police, who existed to forcibly recover library books that were past due, and the Happy Bicycle Disposal Corps, who devoted themselves to organizing the bicycles all over campus. Lucky Cat Chinese food also had connections to a part of the school festival office, a handful of eccentric clubs and associations, such as the Aizan Electric Railway Research Association, the Bedroom Investigation Commission, and the Sophistry Debate Club, and some religious clubs that operated in dubious ways. The commonly held belief was that historically the printing office was the mother organization, so the printing office chief was said to possess overarching authority, but it was unclear whether such any person actually existed. There was much speculation. Some said the chief was a black-haired maiden of a tender age, while others said the chief was a grizzled law professor, and then there were those who said they were a boob-loving weirdo in a mask who had been living under the clock tower for 20 years. In any case, a guy like me running around as a grunt for the library police certainly had no occasion to come into contact with whoever they were. When I joined the library police on Aijima's invitation, he told me, "For now, this guy will be your partner," and introduced me to someone in the law faculty courtyard. I said, Ozu. Standing there was a creepy fellow, with a terribly inauspicious looking face. At first, I thought he was a messenger from hell, only I, with my heightened sensitivities, could see. That was how I met Ozu. There's a famous book that begins with an ordinary man waking up one morning to find he'd been turned into an insect. In my case, it wasn't that dramatic. I was still me, and at a glance, the 4.5 mat tatami room, steeped in my manly essence, was also the same as usual. Of course, some might be of the opinion that I basically started out as an insect anyhow. The clock said 6, but it wasn't clear whether it was 6 in the morning or 6 in the evening. I thought about it as I lay there, but I wasn't sure how long I had slept. Squirming like an insect on top of my futon, I sluggishly got up. It was quiet. I boiled some coffee and decided to eat some castella. Upon finishing my bleak meal, I realized I needed to pee. I headed out into the hallway to the common bathroom located next to the building's entrance. I opened the door and stepped into my 4.5 mat tatami room. How curious! I turned around. My chaotic 4.5 mat tatami room was there, and yet on the other side of the half-open door was also my chaotic 4.5 mat tatami room. It was like looking at my room in a mirror. Oh, so is he jumping realities now? I went through the opening and stepped into the 4.5 mat tatami room. There was no doubt about it. This was my room. The feel of the tatami when I flopped on it, the miscellaneous books lining the bookcase, the broken TV, the desk I'd been using since I was an elementary schooler, the dusty sink, a very lived-in scene. I went back through the door to my room, and that was also, without a doubt, my room. Even I, who through long years of training had tempered my heart to the point that little things wouldn't alarm me, was alarmed. What strange phenomenon was this? My 4.5 mat tatami room had become 2. If I couldn't get out through the door, I would have to open a window. I opened the curtains I had been keeping shut for ages, but on the other side of the frosted glass, a fluorescent light was shining. When I shoved my window open, I found myself peering into my own 4.5 mat tatami room. I stepped over the window frame and went inside to check the particulars, but it was indeed my room. I went back into the first room. I smoked a cigarette and tried to calm down. Thus began what ended up being 80 days of exploring a world of 4.5 mat tatami rooms. Wow! I'm guessing there's food and water in there? This entire adventure takes place almost entirely in essentially identical 4.5 mat tatami rooms. For that reason, before discussing the adventure proper, I'd like to give you readers a clear image of my room. First, on the north side, there is a door about as flimsy as wafer cookies made for babies. It's covered in indecent stickers, traces of the previous resident, so there's a lot going on there. Next to the door, there's a sink. Okay, so that's where he's getting water at least. That had been left to its filth, and a pile of random junk such as a dusty can of hair gel, a hot plate, and whatnot. I guarantee it would kill any cook's motivation. I flat out refused to prepare food in such a desolate space and had been putting the old saying, boys should stay out of the kitchen, into practice. Most of the northern wall is a closet crammed carelessly with my utterly cheerless clothing, books I didn't read, documents I hesitated to throw out, and electric heater I used to repel general winter, among other stuff. It's also home to my library of obscenities. Most of the eastern wall is the bookcase. Next to the bookcase is a vacuum cleaner and a rice cooker, though I've never felt compelled to use either of them. Is he going to put the rice cooker out in the hallway? I'll bet he is. I'll bet he will. There's a window on the southern side, and in front of it is my trusty desk I've been using since elementary school. The drawer doesn't open, so I've forgotten what's inside. On the eastern side, in the narrow area between the bookcase and the desk, extends a space where items that have no other place to go get tossed. Being put there is commonly known as being sent to Siberia. I keep thinking I need to get a handle on what lies in that chaotic territory, but it's so horrifying that I hadn't started. Once you wander in there, there's a very low chance of coming out alive. On the western side, there's a broken TV and a small refrigerator. Then we're back on the northern side. It only takes a few seconds to take a spin around this place, but this 4.5 mat tatami room might as well be my brain. Oh, maybe a bit of like symbolism there. So he's kind of like trapped inside his own mind, kind of like how he's become a little bit more of a shut-in this universe. So why a 4.5 mat tatami room in the first place? I knew one person living in a 3-mat room. He was even more of a solitary idealist of a student than me and spent his time reading Being and Time. He was so strong-willed and self-confident that his unwillingness to accommodate himself to the world took a turn, and last year his parents came from his hometown to retrieve him. Oh, wow. I've heard that two-mat rooms. Oh, it's all symbolic. I've heard that 2-mat rooms do exist here in Kyoto. It's hard to believe, but apparently there really is a room near Jodoji that is just 2 tatami mats laid end to end. I'm sure if you sleep in what is basically a hallway, you must get taller. And then, according to the terrifying rumor around town, there's a building by the name of, so in the neighborhood of the Kita Shirakawa Baptist Hospital, that has a 1-mat room. A student saw it, and a few days later, that same student disappeared under mysterious circumstances, and everyone they knew suffered a string of bad luck. Now we come to a 4.5 mat tatami rooms. What? I'm trying to think of other symbolism. I know 4 in Asian cultures, it's bad luck and it means death, but his is 4.5 mat tatami rooms. Compared to 1, 2, or 3 mat rooms, 4.5 mat tatami rooms are a tidy little package. You lay 3 mats side by side and then lay the fourth next to them perpendicularly. When you put a half mat in the leftover place, you get a perfect square. Isn't that beautiful? You can make a square with 2 mats, but it's cramped. If, on the other hand, you make a square larger than 4.5 mats, you end up with something as large as the feudal lord Takeda Shingen's lavatory. So if you're not careful, you could get lost. I've been a staunch supporter of 4.5 mat tatami rooms since starting college. Are people who live in 7, 8, or 10 mat rooms really worthy of lording over that much space? Do they really know every corner of it like the back of their hand? With control of a space comes responsibility. The amount of space we humans are capable of controlling is 4.5 mat tatami mats or less. Those villains who would greedily pursue more will someday find themselves on the receiving end of a fearsome counterattack from a corner of their room. That's what I've always maintained. Okay, so that was a lot. His logic is a bit strange, but basically what I'm getting from this is he has a bit of anxiety and he feels a lot of responsibility. But the size of the room seems to be connected to somebody's mental state. So I think maybe what he's saying is people who have like very large rooms or want very large rooms, they don't have the sense of responsibility that he has. You know, he wants responsibility over like every single little nook and cranny of his space. So he doesn't want anything too large because he can't handle that level of responsibility. So at least he knows his limits, you know, but he should try to be expanding himself a little bit more. But he is comfortable where he is, but at the same time, there is a danger of staying within comfort to the point where you're not challenging yourself, you're not growing as a person. So I think that's where he is, and that's what all that, you know, his giant rant about the size of tatami mats meant. My exploration of the tatami world had begun. Yeah, so now he's kind of being forced to expand his horizons in a way that's still comforting because it's still his same room over and over and over. And I think this is going to teach him a lesson about expanding your horizons and exploring more of the world and its differences, and how that can be much more exciting than just the same boring room and the same boring day and the same boring life hour by hour. Just go out and do something different. So I think that's what he's going to learn here. My exploration of the tatami world had begun, but my conscience doesn't allow me to act impulsively. I thoroughly analyze until there is no more analysis to be done. Then I carefully take infallible measures. I'm the type of person who analyzes so much that the infallible measures happens too late. So yeah, this is the same impression that I got earlier, where he's like scared of making mistakes and he's so much of a perfectionist that he limits himself and freezes himself in place. Having returned to my original 4.5 mat tatami room, I thought about what my next move should be. A great individual must think with a clear head under any circumstances and never get agitated. After thinking clearly, I decided to make use of the beer bottle Ozu had left in my room 2 weeks earlier. I was able to regain my composure by urinating into it. Okay, I guess that would be the only way to like go to the bathroom, because they have a shared bathroom for all the rooms. So if it's just his room over and over and over, yeah, that would stink. Just having beer bottles to go pee in. Panicking wouldn't get me anywhere. Ever since becoming a junior, in name only, the vast majority of my existence had been spent in this space. I hadn't shown any enthusiasm for leaving before, so if I got all flustered about it now, How shallow would that be? Barring imminent crisis, a person like me wasn't required to take any action. If I sat tight and kept my wits about me, perhaps things would take a turn for the better. So that's what I decided to do. I leisurely opened Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and turned my attention to the far-off world of the sea bottom. Oh, so he sees that, he's limited and where he can go. So he just kind of divulges into this fantasy world. When I eventually tired of that, I glanced over my library of obscenities, made an appropriate selection, and turned my attention to the world of sensuality. I paid very close attention. I paid such close attention, I wore myself out. I thought about turning on the TV, but the TV had been on the fritz for ages. The screen spun like a pinwheel in a typhoon, so unless you had if you had exceptional dynamic visual acuity, it was impossible to tell what was on it. After staring at it for a little while, I felt sick. If I had known the situation was going to befall me, I would have taken it to be repaired. Soon the clock's hands had made one complete turn. After I ate a remnant of fish burger I had fried up, all that was left was costella. There was a chunk of daikon too, but I didn't bother with that for the moment. I checked once more before going to sleep, but outside both the door and the window were 4.5 mat tatami rooms. I turned off the light, lay down on my futon, and frowned at the ceiling. How had I ended up in this freakish realm? I came up with one hypothesis. This was the curse of the Kiyamachi fortune teller. Okay, we're gonna get the fortune teller again. A few days earlier, I had gone to Kawamachi for a change of pace. I stopped into the used bookstore Gabi Shobo. Okay, this is how we met the fortune teller. We've already read all this before. He's imagining, oh, it will be cursed if you do this. Okay, if I had abandoned my own judgment sooner, I wouldn't have holed myself up in my 4.5 mat tatami castle after getting caught up in that weird organization, Lucky Cat Chinese Food, and being treated so badly, and I probably wouldn't have met Ozu with his labyrinth character. Okay, so I think all of this is the same. Yep, that is. Okay, it's not too late. With all possible haste, seek an objective opinion and escape into one of the other lives you could have. Okay, she asks him what he wants to know. Okay, then she basically tells him vague stuff. A clever hawk hides his talons. Okay, don't let good opportunities pass you by. Okay, then she tells him the Colosseo thing, so we're probably going to see the Colosseum again. Okay, this looks all the same. Okay, yep, when your chance comes, don't miss it. Okay, when your chance comes, don't miss it. I know we've read this before, but just to remind ourselves what she says. When it comes, you can't go on idly doing the same things you've always done. Be bold and try seizing your chance by doing something completely different. If you do that, your dissatisfaction will disappear and you'll be able to walk down a new path. Though there may lie a different dissatisfaction, I'm sure you understand. And then he doesn't understand. Okay, yep, that was all the same. This might be a terrible curse she put on me. Maybe the key to breaking it is hidden in that word she mentioned, Colosseo. I swore I wouldn't rest until I had solved the puzzle, and it was still on my mind as I drifted into a gentle sleep. When I woke up, the clock was pointing to 12. I got up and opened the curtains. No bright daylight streamed in, but neither was I greeted with the darkness of night. Instead, there was just the pale fluorescent light of the 4.5 mat tatami room next door. I thought if I had slept, things would fix themselves somehow, but even when I woke up, the situation hadn't changed one bit. When I tried opening the door, too, it led to the adjacent 4.5 mat tatami room. Going forward, for your convenience, I'm going to call the 4.5 mat tatami room I was in to begin with, oh gosh, FHMTRO. And I'm going to call the one through the door FHMTR1. And the one through the window, what, FHMTR-1. Okay, I guess that makes sense. I sat glumly cross-legged in the middle of the 4.5 mat tatami room, listening to the coffee burble. As you might expect, I was hungry. There was no castella left. Oh no. I had eaten the fish burger. Praying something had appeared out of nowhere when I wasn't looking, I opened the fridge. But all I had was the chunk of daikon, soy sauce, salt, pepper, and shichimi. I didn't even have that college student essential instant ramen. This is what I got for relying on convenience stores. I boiled the chunk of daikon and ate it with soy sauce and shichimi. I sipped coffee to fill my stomach. I ran out of food sometime on the second day. All I had left was coffee and cigarettes. No matter how gracefully I employed those to delay the feeling of starvation, at some point my stomach would meet my back. I would perish in this 4.5 mat tatami room without anyone knowing and shrivel up. I cradled my head in a corner and tried to endure by insisting I had no idea what was going on, but even with no idea what was going on, you'd get hungry. I was forced to come up with a plan to solve the food problem on a fundamental level. Oh, so then the other tatami rooms don't have their own food? When you think of a college student, you think of filth. When you think of filth, you think of fungus. I wondered whether, I could eat the mushrooms that sprouted in closet corners. But when I pulled out my library of obscenities, cardboard boxes, and half-rotten paperwork and scrounged around inside my closet, it was dry. Not the sort of environment mushrooms would thrive in. Should I try to cultivate them systematically by spreading out a layer of dirty laundry and sprinkling water on it? But given the choice to live a carefree life surviving on mushrooms grown on my own dirty clothes, I would choose honorable hunger. I also considered boiling and eating the tatami. Given how steeped in manly essence it was, it probably contained some nutrients, but it had too much fiber. My bowels would be moving as smoothly as the Lake Biwa Canal, which would surely only hasten my doom. I'm not sure what was so fun about my ceiling, but a moth had been hanging out on one corner completely still. After a while, I began to consider it a source of animal protein. It may have been an insect, but it was still an animal. People who get lost in the mountains grill and eat woolly bears, hornworms, drone beetles, anything. But if I was going to grill and eat the squishy moth covered in powdery scales, licking the dust in the corner seemed preferable. If I could extend my life by consuming my body's excess, that would have been a sublime survival drama, but I'm fuel efficient, so my flesh has eliminated anything deemed unnecessary. So it's basically a fancy way of saying he's skinny already. If I had any excess, I suppose it's my earlobes. Like a spit-roasted sparrow, I'm all bones, a man who can't be eaten. I'm not interested in people pointing at me behind my back and saying, he survived by eating his own earlobes. What? If it was beneath me to eat homegrown mushrooms, tatami, the moth, and my earlobes, okay, then I was just thinking, I know someone in my family says that, if you have long earlobes, that means that you will become wealthy later in life. So I'm wondering if that has something to do with his weird talk about eating his earlobes. So it could basically be saying, oh yeah, you're gonna eat your future or your prosperous future in order to survive right now. Then I would have to survive on whiskey, vitamins, coffee, and cigarettes. I was Robinson Crusoe, washed up on a deserted 4.5 mat tatami room. In his case, he had a gun and could go hunting, but the best I could manage would be to catch the moth fluttering around my ceiling, I mean, it's something, I guess. But in my case, I have water on tap, a full complement of furniture, and no need to fear ferocious animal attacks. It was actually a bit unclear whether I was doing what I was doing qualified as survival or not. I think it is. You have to, use your brain to find sources of food. That day, I once again read 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, haughtily relaxing as if to provoke the cruel God watching me. I couldn't see the light of the sun, so I had no idea whether it was day or night. So, though I split the time into days, I'm not sure if the divisions were accurate. If I closed the curtains and shut the door, everything looked as usual, so it felt like Ozu would kick in the door to start some obnoxious trouble. The blessing in this curse was that I had already had my wisdom tooth pulled 2 weeks ago. If I hadn't, unable to bear the excruciating pain, I would have been running around the 4.5 mat tatami rooms in search of a dentist before dying in agony. The tooth I had pulled at Kubozuka Dental on Mikage Dori was displayed reverently on my desk. By the end of April, my jaw was hurting so badly I couldn't sleep properly. I diagnosed myself with temporomandibular joint disorder. They say you can get it from stress. For someone like me, who's as delicate as dandelion fluff, and once lost himself in thought like a scholarly priest on Mount Hiei, it's strange that this was my first brush with TMJ. Okay, that's yeah, when you kind of like clench your jaw and like grind your teeth and it like kind of hurts your jaw over time. I should have gotten it sooner. That realization was deeply satisfying. This was actually a trial the chosen ones must submit to. Writhing on my tatami floor, I nevertheless became ecstatic. There's no way you're stressed. I refuse to believe that. Ozu looked as if he had spotted a pervert. You quit the org and have been doing a whole lot of nothing ever since. On the surface, it might have looked as though I wasn't doing anything, but I was actually laboring day by day on unrewarded meditations. So you could say I was under extreme stress. That's what I argued. This TMJ disorder was clear proof of my strenuous thinking. I'm sure it's just a cavity, Ozu commented helpfully. Are you stupid? It's not my tooth that hurts, it's my jaw. Seeing me writhing in agony, Ozu recommended Kubozuka Dental. He said a beautiful hygienist named Hanuki worked there, but I was against it. Even if there hadn't exactly been many vicissitudes, that time in my room had been enlightening. I had tempered my heart and tempered it again. Still, I was terrified of the dentist. I'm not going to the dentist. But a young woman sticks her fingers in your mouth. You should be grateful. How often do you get the opportunity to lick a woman's fingers? I don't think you ever will. Think of it this way. Your cavity is a golden ticket to some lady finger licking action. Don't lump me in with freaks like you. I have no desire to lick a woman's fingers, I said. Liar, liar, pants on a wire. Are you hanging up the laundry, dumbass? You mean fire. Just go to the dentist. His endorsement was awfully enthusiastic. One night, the pain oozing from my jaw zapped through both rows of my teeth, creating a sort of resonance that wreaked havoc, as if a ton of fat little fairies were having a Cossack dance contest in my mouth. With no other choice, I gave in to Ozu's persuasion. The pain in my jaw was due not to my being delicate or to my intense meditations, but to a cavity in a wisdom tooth. Though I was loath to admit it, Ozu's guess was correct. This is what I got for slacking on brushing my teeth after quitting the organization and living a solitary life where I hardly met anybody. I was absolutely not enticed by the taste of her fingers, but the hygienist Hanuki was indeed charming. Age-wise, she must have been in her late 20s. Her hair was pulled into a bun, making her face with the severity of a Sengoku-era warlord's wife even more severe. Furrowing her dignified brow, she deftly used an implement that made a horrendous whining sound, to do a splendid job of removing the plaque from my teeth. I expressed respect for her confident skills. After my treatment was finished, I mentioned that I had come to Ozu's recommendation. She seemed to know him well and said, "He's so funny, isn't he?" Then, as if handing me a newborn baby, she gave me my tooth, swaddled in medical cotton. I folded it up and then placed the memorial tooth on my desk at home. I gazed upon it every day. For some reason, I found it difficult to throw away. Somewhere in my mind, I was making light of the situation, thinking it must be a dream. But even after about 3 days, on the other side of the door was a 4.5 mat tatami room, and on the other side of the window was a 4.5 mat tatami room. Naturally, at that point, I could no longer lie around reading 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I was out of food, and I only had a few cigarettes left. I preferred to do as little as possible and maintain my pride, but what good would my little bit of pride be if I lost my life? I wonder if this is like symbolic of, you can stay in comfort and, your comfort zone for a certain amount of time, but at some point, you do get to the point where you have to either like escape the tatami mat mental cage or get trapped there forever. So I think I see the symbolism here. I poured coffee into my empty stomach, ooh, that's gotta be tough, and lapped at a little dish of soy sauce to stave off hunger. I would apologize for bringing up the vulgar topic, but it makes no sense to apologize for a little vulgarity at this point. But I won't. No matter how little food one is eating, the urge to expel waste still arises. Liquids I put into the beer bottle until it was full, and I had the brilliant idea to wash them down the sink, so that was no trouble. The problem was what to do about the solids. Spurred by my need to defecate, I went through the door to invade, number one. That room also had a window. I opened the curtains with a prayer, but it appeared that behind the window, the 4.5 mat tatami rooms continued with number 2. I went back to the original room and climbed through the window to -1 and opened the door there, but as expected, that led to -2. Okay, so that is interesting that he didn't go past like 2 rooms until he's like basically has to really poop really bad. Like, was it 1 or 2 days later? I thought he would have explored further by now, but okay, that's a little surprising. How far do these 4.5 mat tatami rooms go? But first I had to avert the current crisis. After some thought, I spread an old newspaper on the tatami, nonchalantly did my business on that, then put it in a plastic bag, which I tightly tied shut. With that imminent crisis out of the way, the issues of food and cigarettes crossed my mind. At this point, I had no choice but to stand up and work towards a solution myself. No matter what kind of world you're in, you have only yourself to rely on. I solved the food and cigarette issues in the following way. I moved to number 1. I thought he'd do that. Oh my gosh. I was starting to assume that the other rooms didn't have any food or any supplies because he was like freaking out that, oh no, if I've run out of food, what will I do? I might die. But he just goes into another room. So I think that kind of shows his like inability to move or expand or like have any changes in his life. The room through the door was clearly my room, so there was no issue with me using it how I pleased. When I stepped through the door, I found a pack of cigarettes, and I found things I thought I might never see again. Fish burger and castella. There was a chunk of daikon, too. For starters, I fried up the fish burger, seasoned it with plenty of pepper, and heartily savored my first animal protein in 3 days. So he just hung out in his first room for 3 days, like imagining dying and starving to death when there's like food in the other rooms. A fish burger has never tasted so good. After that, I had a slice of castella for dessert. I felt energy well up inside me as if I'd come back to life. I looked through the window at number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number infinity. Could it be that my 4.5 mat tatami room continued on forever? What a miserable infinite sequence of a world. I was living in an apartment larger than the surface of the earth. Though the situation was rather hopeless, you could also say I was fortunate. If I ate all the food in one room, all I had to do was go to the next to acquire more fish burger and castella. It wasn't a balanced diet, but it would keep me from dying of starvation in the near term. And I couldn't ignore the warmth I got from the castella Ozu had given me. After our unintended meeting in the spring of freshman year, we'd had a fatal bond that I couldn't break even if I wanted to, but for once I felt his existence had been useful. Oh, is he warming up to Ozu? After starting college, I worked with the library police for 1.5 years and then called it quits. As I mentioned before, the library police's purpose as an organization was to chase down villains who don't return their library books on time and forcefully recover the borrowed materials. When necessary, they didn't hesitate to employ inhumane methods. Or rather, I should say, they only employed inhumane methods. Why the library police had taken on this role, what relationship they had to the university's library, the answers to these questions were not to be pursued. Pursuing them could put you in danger. Gee. The library police did something else besides recover overdue library books. They also collected comprehensive personal information about given targets to use towards various ends, like blackmail. This data collection was originally a way of forcing the return of books. Gosh. To know where your target was, you had to have an idea of where they went. And in order to recover books from the nasty ones who would ignore you and try to walk away, you needed to grasp their weaknesses. But as the data piled up, the organization was made captive to the power and charms of intel. It had been decades since the data collection had deviated wildly from its original mission and began to expand. The library police network covered campus, of course, but it had also spread north to Sanzen-in Temple in Ohara and south to Byodo-in's Phoenix Hall in Uji, reaching all over Kyoto and beyond. Let's say the chief of library police felt like breaking up a couple, A, male 21, and B, female 20. With a snap of his fingers, they could procure intel that A is going out with B, but actually he's involved with C, whom he knows from tennis club. These are C's grades. She doesn't have enough credits and may not graduate on time. The chief would also have no trouble getting additional information that would allow him to remotely manipulate C to deal a critical blow to A and B's relationships, all over a library book. The only org that could rival the printing office with its enormous revenue from forging massive numbers of reports was the library police. Since the identity of the printing office's head was shrouded in mystery, it was no wonder that the chief of library police was considered the de facto leader of the Lucky Cat Chinese food. At the time, I was an underling with no contact whatsoever with the chief. Underlings were tasked with recovering library books. That said, I didn't go about it very smartly. I would let the borrower give me excuses, and then we'd hit it off and go drinking together. Talk about uninvested. The reason I still managed to get results was that I had Ozu. Ozu employed all manner of techniques to recover library books. Stakeouts, tears, dirty traps, blackmail, physical assault, under cover of darkness, even theft. Naturally, he did well. Gee, Ozu. And as his partner, my standing also improved. To someone like me, who was half-assing it, wondering if the library police even really existed, it was totally annoying. Additionally, Ozu enjoyed intel collection so much that he continued to expand his mysterious network of connections and rose to become what you would call Aijima's right-hand man. The spring of my sophomore year, Aijima became chief of library police. He tried to install Ozu and me in executive positions, but surprisingly, Ozu refused the offer and transferred to the printing office. With no other choice, I became an executive, but I had impressively little motivation and just rotted away day after fruitless day. In no time, my status plummeted to executive in name only. Aijima despised me and paid so little attention to me, I might as well have been a pebble by the wayside. During my library police era, I met a curious individual. It was the winter of my freshman year. Someone had borrowed a book called The Month with No Gods, a biography of a certain painter, and hadn't returned it in over 6 months. I was ordered to recover the book, so I decided to make contact with the borrower. He lived on the second floor of the building I lived in, Shimogamo Yusuiso, and his name was Seitaro Higuchi. He was a puzzling fellow. He didn't seem like a student, but neither did he seem like a working adult. It was hard to tell whether he was in his 4.5-mat tatami room or not. Even if he was, you didn't see much of him. Suspecting he was in, I once opened his door to find a duck waddling around and Higuchi having vanished somewhere. He wore a navy yukata, and his eggplant-shaped face was perpetually unshaven. His peculiar appearance meant it was easy to spot him when he was out, but when I tried to make contact, he would disappear like a puff of smoke. I had lost sight of him a number of times at Shimogamo Shrine and along the Daimachi shopping street. One late night, I finally managed to nab him at the Neko ramen noodle stall. "You've been stalking me for a while," he said with a broad smile. "I keep thinking I should return it, but I just read so slowly." "Well, it's just so very overdue." "Yes, I know. I'll give up." We slurped our ramen together. I stuck close to him on our way back to Shimogamo Yusuiso. "I'm going to hit the loo quick," he said, and ducked into the communal bathroom. I waited a while, but he wasn't coming out. When my patience expired, I stepped into the bathroom to find it an empty husk. When I went up to his room on the second floor, there was light coming through the little window above the door. What a godly move. I drummed on the door and called, "Higuchi," but there was no answer. I felt like he was mocking me. As I was losing my temper there, Ozu, who was still my partner at the time, came along. "Sorry, that man is my master," he said. "Please leave him be." "You really think he can get away with that?" "It's not happening. He never returns anything he's borrowed." If what Ozu said was true, I had no choice but to withdraw. I wondered what exactly Higuchi was a master of, but if a guy like Ozu respected him, the chances of him being a decent person were slim to none. "Good evening, master. I brought you some stuff." With a sideways glance at me, Ozu went into Higuchi's room. Turning around as he shut the door, he grinned and said, "Sorry." For 2 days, I wandered between room number 3 and room -3 and room 3. Things didn't improve. Anyhow, I had stuff to do. I did push-ups, pseudo-Hindu squats, and whatnot for exercise. I drank a barrel's worth of coffee. I put 6 castella cakes into my stomach and developed a new cuisine of fish burger and daikon. I read the passage in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea about the Nautilus's tantalizing dinner table over and over, drooling. Until then, I had holed up in my 4.5-mat tatami room by choice, but I was always confident that I could leave if I wanted. If I opened the door, the dirty hallway was there, and at the end of the dirty hallway was the dirty bathroom and the dirty shoe cubbies, and I could exit this dirty building and go outside. It was precisely because I could go outside whenever I wanted that I stayed in. Before long, the reality of no matter how many times I went out, I was in a 4.5-mat tatami room began to grate on me, and the calcium deficiency I developed due to my food situation made me cranky. No matter how patiently I waited, a change in the right direction refused to come. At that point, all I could do was embark on a grand adventure to the ends of this infinite tatami world to solve its mysteries and hopefully escape. One day, after about a week trapped in this barren land, at 6 morning or night, I still didn't know, I decided to set out. From room 0, I had two choices, the door or the window. I chose the door. In other words, I decided to traverse rooms 1, 2, 3, and so on. I decided I would take this 4.5 mat tatami road as far as it went. There was no need to steel my resolve for anything so epic as aiming for the ends of the earth, because I would just be continually walking across my room. There was no danger of being attacked by a ferocious beast, no chance of blizzards, and I didn't have to think about my food supply. There was no need to prepare because during every point of the journey, I could be in my own room. If I got tired at any time, I could burrow into my futon. Though I never did meet a ferocious beast, I would have several horrifying encounters. Ooh. The first day I went through 24 and a half, oh, only 24? 24 and a half mat tatami rooms. Yet the 4.5 mat tatami rooms continued. Things started to feel stupid, so I slept there for the night. On the third day, I discovered alchemy. When I explained the layout of my 4.5 mat tatami room, I mentioned the space between my desk and the bookcase. On that day, I decided to investigate that territory to see if there was anything useful in it. I found a shabby wallet that had been sent to Siberia. Feeling around inside it, I found there was 1,000 yen note remaining. I sat in the center of the room and caressed the wrinkled 1,000 yen. I laughed hollowly. What good was 1,000 yen in this situation? In this tatami world, completely cut off from our capitalist society, 1,000 yen note had as much value as a scrap of paper. But when I went to the next room, I found the same old wallet and the 1,000 yen inside. I felt as though I'd been struck by lightning. If every room had 1,000 yen in it, then every time I switched rooms, I could make 1,000 yen. Moving through 10 rooms would yield 10,000 yen. Moving through 1,000 rooms would yield, what a great racket. If I ever escaped the tatami world, I would be able to pay for the rest of my tuition and probably cover living expenses too. A luxurious time out in Gion would no longer be just a dream. After that, I traveled with a backpack. Every time I switched rooms, I threw 1,000 yen in. At first, I would get sick of moving after a while, so I spent the rest of my time reading or inflating and deflating my fantasies to distract myself. I was so bored, I had the admirable thought that maybe I should study, so I sat down at my desk but ended up getting destroyed by the Schrödinger equation. From time to time, the old woman's words reappeared in the back of my mind. What did she mean by Colossio? I believed my hypothesis that she had cursed me. It was clear that Colossio was the key to breaking the curse, but there was no way I had one in my room. As I passed through the vast string of 4.5 mat tatami rooms, I racked my brain for any Colossio associations, but found nothing. On my brutal journey, I thought about the Mochiguma who had soothed my spirit for the past year. Now, with my heart losing warmth, the softness of the Mochiguma was a fond memory. The Mochiguma was a spongy bear plushie. I had acquired it at the Shimogamo Shrine used book fair the previous summer, and ever since it had provided me with invaluable emotional support. The gray bear was as soft and squishy as a baby's cheeks. It was about as tall as a can of soda. As you kneaded it, your face would naturally relax into a smile. I kept that lovable plushie with me at all times. After cutting ties with the organization and holing up in my room to apply myself to rigorous austerities, that half yokai Ozu was the only one who ever visited me. But even in a solitary life like that, I required a companion. But my plushie had vanished in a bizarre incident at the laundromat a few days before I set off on this journey. I was washing the Mochiguma, since it had gotten a bit grimy, steeping in my manly essence. But when I opened the machine, I saw that someone had taken my Mochiguma. Is he going to find his other underground rinse from the other universe and crammed in a pile of men's underwear? Yes! These undergarments had neither charm nor anything else going for them. When I investigated further, however, I discovered they were my usual underwear, saddled with the sad stains I hadn't been able to remove no matter how I tried. Could it be that I only imagined that I was washing my bare? Maybe I was actually just doing regular laundry. I was possible I was probably just so loath to do the banal task of laundry that I averted my eyes from the cruel reality that I was washing my underwear and thus lost myself in a fantasy of washing a cute bear that was never even here, I thought. The hazards of autopilot. When I returned to my room, however, my underwear was there just as it had been. Faced with double the underwear, I had no idea what I was supposed to do. It was a mystery that never resolved. I never did find my Mochiguma either. I hope my Mochiguma is out there somewhere thriving. I wish the plushie well as I aimlessly wandered the 4.5 mat tatami rooms. At first, I was tallying the 4.5 mat rooms I had conquered, but after a while, I stopped counting. I opened the door, went through, crossed room number N, opened the window, climbed over the frame, crossed room N+1, opened the door, went through, crossed N+2, opened the window, rinse, wash, repeat. I made 1,000 yen in each room, but since I could see no way of escaping, the value of 1,000 yen note fluctuated wildly, depending on my hope versus my despair. Ooh, I like that. If I couldn't escape, then all I was collecting were scraps of paper. The only reason I didn't quit gathering them, even when their value plummeted, was in my indomitable spirit, perhaps you could say, or maybe my poverty mentality. I ate a mountain of costella, fried up fish burgers, and continued my solo march. I sometimes wondered if I had died, descended into tatami hell, and then forced to perform endless penance without realizing it. Memories of all the various sins I'd committed paraded through my mind, and I was so mortified I fainted in agony. I also occasionally screamed, "Of course I would go to hell." Finally, I reached my limit and lay down on the tatami like a log. I refused to march anymore. Instead, I absorbed myself in the curious case book of Inspector Hanshichi. I got drunk on cheap whiskey and smoked cigarettes. I shouted at the ceiling, "Why did this have to happen to me?" I grew frightened of the utterly silent world surrounding me and sang every song I could think of at the top of my lungs. It wasn't like anyone could complain. I might as well have gotten naked, painted myself pink, and marched shouting obscenities, the likes of which I had never vocalized before, but thought I might have been all alone. My rationality was still in working order. Oh, but though I might have been all alone. Under the circumstances, it wouldn't have been surprising for someone to lose their grip. I was able to tolerate the situation precisely because I was me. Anyway, I would be remiss not to mention my various discoveries. I realized that the 4.5 mat tatami rooms I had thought were identical were actually each a little different. Ooh. It must have been about 10 days since I started my journey. It was only a slight difference, but the section of titles lined up on the bookshelves had changed. I was going to read The Curious Case of Inspector Hanshichi, but the room I was in didn't have it. What did this mean? I didn't know yet. I'm going to discuss hygiene issues in the tatami world. Well, he does have a sink, so he could bathe, bathe at the sink. I hate doing laundry, so I was graceful to not have to. There were clothes in each room, so if my clothes got dirty, I could just change. I started changing my underwear every day, so strangely, in this world with no laundromats, I was actually wearing clean underwear more often. Ew, that means he wasn't changing his underwear every day before. Early on, I was shaving my beard, but it started to become more and more of a pain until I quit. I couldn't even go to a convenience store, so there was absolutely no need to shave in the first place. My hair became all you can grow. I had the face of Robinson Crusoe washed up on a distant 4.5 mat tatami shores. My beard and hair didn't bother me much, but I was uncomfortable with the dirt on my body was accumulating. Shimogamo Yusu Iso had a coin-operated shower at the end of a hall, but with the concept of halls removed from the world It was also impossible for me to use the shower at the end of one. My only option was to boil some water in a pot, put it in the sink, wet a towel, and scrub myself that way. I hummed and tried to make like I was taking a shower, but it was pretty miserable. At loose ends, with nothing else to think about, I considered the past 2 years I had wasted. It was a bit late, but I regretted getting obsessed with playing idiotic games of pretend. As a sophomore, with my partnership with Ozu dissolved, I became a record breakingly useless executive, notorious as the laziest slacker in all of the library police history. Even though I was just bumming around, I never got kicked out or threatened. Perhaps they were tolerating me because of my relationship with Ozu, who continued to visit me frequently even after carrying his brilliant achievements in the library police over to the printing office, where he was promoted to executive. Yeah, where does Ozu get all this energy to do so much stuff? He's in so many clubs at the same time. I consulted with Ozu about wanting to quit, but he laughed and paid no attention. Oh, come on, if you hang around, I'm sure you'll have enough fun to make it worth your while. What did he know? Sophomore year was so up in the air, it's irritating. I was over persevering. I was an executive, so I attended some secret meetings and did some scheming, even if only as a formality. But no matter what I did, it all seemed idiotic. The members of the org thought of me as the idiot exec, and Aijima, from his position as chief of library police, wouldn't even talk to me. My aversion to him only grew. Soon I was thinking about escape every night. Simply running away would be boring. I wanted to rebel and make a flashy exit that would go down in library police history. In early autumn of my sophomore year, I mentioned something about that to Ozu while we were drinking, and he said, I wouldn't. It may just be a goofy college game, but the intel network is real. These guys are terrifying when you get on their bad side. I'm not afraid. Ozu rolled around on the tatami, squashing my mochi guma. Fugyu, he exclaimed. This is how you'll end up. That would pain my heart. Like you give a shit, I said. There you go again. Your rep might be in the toilet right now, but I'm doing some genius legwork to improve it. I'd appreciate some gratitude. Who'd thank you? Being grateful doesn't cost a thing, you know. Autumn's melancholy was just starting to sink into my bones, so the sound of the simmering hot pot warmed my soul. The fact that the only person I had to spend these autumn nights with was Ozu struck me as a serious problem. It was wrong as a human being. This was no time to be rotting away mixed up in some weird organization. Outside the org, a normal campus life was waiting for me. You're probably wishing you had spent your time as a student better, huh? Ozu abruptly struck to the heart of the matter. You're restless lately. Are you sure you're not in love? When you fall in love, you realize how pathetic you are. I don't fall in love. Didn't you work part-time at the Shimogamo Shrine used book fair? I think you met someone there. Ooh, Akashi. I ignored his astute observation. There are a lot of things I should have done differently, I said. Not that it's any consolation, but I think you would have met me no matter what. I just know it. No matter what happened, I would have done everything in my power to correct you. You can struggle against fate all you want, but it's futile. He held up a pinky finger. We're connected by the black thread of fate. The horrific image of two men bound like boneless hands on a dark thread, sinking to dark watery depths, came to mind. Yeah, we read this before. This is another repeat. Okay, we're gonna read ahead anyway. Ozu watched me as he cheerfully munched on some pork. I don't know what to do with Aijima either, he said. Even though I transferred to the printing office, he still comes to me for advice all the time. Why would anyone take a liking to a guy like you? He's like always slamming Ozu. I'm starting to wonder why Ozu hangs out with the main character. My flawless personality, masterful conversation skills, clear mind, adorable face, copious love for my neighbor that never runs dry. That's the recipe for getting people to love you. Maybe you should take notes. "Shut up," I said, and he grinned. With a backward glance at those memories, I continued my journey through the 4.5 mat tatami rooms. There's this thing called geologic time. Split broadly, it goes from Precambrian to Paleozoic, Mesozoic, and then Cenozoic, heading to contemporary times. The Cambrian period, the first of the Paleozoic era, is famous for the Cambrian explosion, during which a variety of life forms appeared. The Mesozoic's Jurassic and Cretaceous periods remind me of happily looking at pictures of dinosaurs as a kid. At the end of the Paleozoic era is the Permian period, but the older Japanese for it uses the kanji to Tatami period. Ooh, okay. So it always makes me imagine the Earth's surface squirming with all kinds of weird creatures getting covered with tatami mats. During that period, the world was made up of countless 2-mat tatami rooms. Then came the Triassic period at the beginning of the Mesozoic era, the 3 tatami period, during which the rooms expanded by 1 mat. Eventually, the dinosaurs arrived and trampled the tatami, ushering in the Jurassic period. All I could think was that the whole world had become 4.5 mat tatami rooms. The Quaternary period had met its end, and the 4.5 mat tatami period had arrived. A mass extinction event had killed off all of the Earth's creatures. The only ones left in the endless 4.5 mat tatami rooms were me and the moth sticking to one corner of the ceiling. No such thing as biodiversity. Is that where the big swarm of moths come from? I wonder if there's like one moth in each room and they all gather. Remember the big swarm of moths? It was said that it seemed to come from the direction of his apartment. So yeah, they must escape like the never-ending tatami room. Like, this is kind of like the back rooms? As the last person in the history of humanity, I vow to forever wander the tatami world. Even if I want to be the Adam and Eve of the next era, there's no Eve, so it's out of the question. That's what I was thinking, resentfully, when I encountered an Eve most absurd. Is it going to be Cowrie? It had been about 20 days since I started my journey. I don't know what number of 4.5 mat tatami room I was in, so let's just call it number K. I had been on the march. Oh gosh, number K for Cowrie. I had been on the march for a few hours, so it was about the time of day that I got sick of it. I decided to take a break and crammed some castella, which I had grown to despise, into my mouth. The light in the next room seemed to be broken. It was flickering pretty bad. There had been some dim rooms among those I had passed through, and I called them the overcast world. They creeped me out for whatever reason, so I always hurried through. After my break, I opened the window and looked into the next room. Someone was sitting in the corner, absorbed in a book. Yes, it's Cowrie. To use a hackneyed phrase, my heart nearly leapt out of my chest. I was so surprised. I hadn't spoken to anyone in more than 20 days during my journey in this deserted world, but now I had suddenly stumbled upon someone. I was more full of fear than joy. The person reading the book was a woman. She was quietly looking down, reading 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which was open in her lap. Beautiful black hair flowed down her back, shining with a glossy luster. She had to be bold to not even look up when I opened the window, so I figured she had to be a witch who ruled this corner of the tatami world. One false move, and she'd make me into a fluffy meat bun and eat me up. Excuse me, my voice was hoarse. No matter how many times I called out to her, she didn't reply. I timidly set foot in the room and approached her. She had an adorable face. Her skin was completely human in hue, and when I gently touched it, there was a springy firmness. She had well-kept hair and was immaculately dressed. She looked like a lady of noble birth, except she didn't move at all. It was as if she had been frozen the instant she cast her eyes into the distance. "So this is Cowrie, huh?" I murmured in spite of myself, astonished. Okay, so I forgot, did Ozu talk to him about Cowrie in the past? In this instance? It happened at the end of the previous autumn. Oh, okay, it's going to talk about this now. Everyone wondered why Aijima, chief of library police, would do such a thing. He mobilized the library police for the express purpose of taking down the boss of an insignificant film club. The victim of this conspiracy was one Jogasaki, who had the Ablutions Film Club under his thumb. Some said Aijima had some previous beef with Jogasaki, while others said he wanted to gain control of the film club to get a girl he liked, who belonged to it, to respect him. Either way, Aijima had decided to drive Jogasaki to destruction. In all matters, first comes intelligence gathering. The intelligence network on campus left no page on Jogasaki unturned. One item they dug up was a picture of his girlfriend. At the meeting called to plan how to dethrone Jogasaki, said picture was shown, and an indescribable cry that couldn't really be termed astonishment shot into the air. "That's our target, this Kaori," Aijima said. He came up with an utterly indefensible plot, just the worst. Kaori was the apple of Jogasaki's eye. The bet was that if we abducted her, Jogasaki would have to swallow our demands. The night of the operation. It was carried out the night before the school festival, so there was festive activity all over campus until late. Jogasaki's lodgings were empty because he was out on film club business. With a passing glance at the lively festival atmosphere and a miserable "why me" aura, a group of library police executives gathered under cover of darkness at Yoshida Shrine. I was among them. We met up with someone called the Key Man and headed to Jogasaki's place. In the original plan, the Key Man would unlock the door and the executives would invade and steal Kaori the Love Doll. But that flow hit a setback outside Jogasaki's building. The reason? One man with neither guts nor a sense of allegiance realized this would be a crime and got cold feet. That man being me. I threw a fit, whining, I hate this, and clung to the concrete wall in resistance. The other executives were disinclined in the first place, so everyone hesitated to carry out the operation. My high-minded resistance in pursuit of justice nearly got Aijima's plan scrapped. Then Aijima himself, whom no one had ever expected to see, showed up. "What are you all doing dawdling out here?" The moment he snapped at us, the execs broke into two groups. One faction moved urgently to conduct the operation, while the other abruptly attempted to flee. Naturally, the faction attempting to flee was me, but I prefer to call it a strategic retreat. Taking advantage of the darkness, I ran off, parting with, "What kind of idiot would participate in this shit?" Aijima's eyes flashed like a snake's. I thought he was going to kill me. I raced through the streets, concealed myself in the pre-festival crowd, and regretted making that comment. My resistance was futile, and Aijima carried Kaori off. A deal was made in a corner of the university's basement late at night, and Jogasaki yielded to Aijima's demands. A few days later, Jogasaki relinquished control of the club he had founded to Aijima. I heard he spoke extremely well of Aijima and even embraced him in front of everyone. It was infuriatingly absurd. This was unacceptable behavior from the chief of the library police. Not to brag, but I can be efficient at times. I made my move without delay. I escaped to the safe house I'd had Ozu procure, lay low so Aijima wouldn't find me, and trembled like a newborn deer. That day I slept in room K. Even the day after, I didn't feel like moving on. Scratching my beard, which had achieved a harmonious whole with my sideburns, I got to thinking. I stared at the grimy wall behind the TV as I drank some coffee. Then I had a divine revelation. These 20 days I had been repeating the monotonous pattern of entering through the door and leaving through the window. When you think about it, isn't that an incredibly close-minded way to go about it? If I really wanted to escape, why didn't I try to break through the wall? Might that not solve everything? There was a study abroad kid living next door, but even if I barged in through a hole in the wall, I figured that since he was foreign, he would have an open mind and be able to laugh it off as a curious cultural difference. Probably. The thought was energizing. I gave the wall a close inspection. The reason I could endure oozing sweat in this room with no air conditioning wasn't that I was noble and patient. It was that the walls were as flimsy and holey as the set of a school play. The walls were so thin that when the study abroad kid next door pulled his girlfriend into his room, I could hear the lovers' whispers they exchanged as if I was right next to them. The moment I installed an air conditioner, the cool air leaking through the walls would immediately provide the inhabitant of room 109 next door with a comfortable living environment. Having chilled room 109, the air would eventually leak into 108, 107, 106, and the chain of comfort would never end. I would end up paying a vast sum to provide the entire floor with a comfortable living environment. Finally, putting up walls that thin would pay off. After doing some push-ups and pseudo-Hindu squats, I grabbed a wrench and laid into the wall. It started to dent with hardly any effort, and a crack appeared. Feeling like Hercules, I merely pounded away for a while, getting covered in dust, but eventually I grew irritated. I kicked the crack with all my might, and a hole about 15 centimeters in diameter opened up. Through the hole shone fluorescent light. Yes! I let out a manly roar and widened the hole to pass through. Then, as you might have expected, I found myself in an identical 4.5 mat tatami room. After that, I did whatever came to mind, broke a bunch of walls in a row, tried and failed to break through the ceiling, saw my mood inflate and deflate again, opened doors, lapped at soy sauce, opened windows, slept for 2 days straight, got wasted and puked, and started busting open walls again as if I had just remembered I could. I continued roaming the vast tatami world. It occurred to me to write a journal, and the following are excerpts from the next 20 days. Incidentally, the dates count from the day I woke up in the tatami world. It wasn't as if I was measuring time accurately. I tallied days by when I slept and woke up. Day 24. Rose at 2. Breakfast with salted coffee and a vitamin. I don't know how many walls I broke today. The walls separating the rooms are fragile, but no matter how many I break, it's pointless. Still, busting up walls takes my mind off things. I get the feeling there's a ray of hope peeking out from the other side. In the end, it's just a dream, I suppose. But couldn't this never-ending tatami world be just a dream? Am I dreaming? A dream, my dream, a rose-colored, meaningful campus life. Ruminating on it depressed me, so I drank some whiskey, ate some fish burger, and went to sleep. Even in my dreams, I was eating fish burgers. Give me a break. Asleep or awake, it's fish burgers. Right now, my body must be entirely made of fish burgers and castella. Day 25. Rose at 4. Today I wasn't feeling motivated, so I only moved a few times. I drank some whiskey. It's awful, and the fact that I've gotten used to that awfulness is sad. Day 27. It seems like I've built some muscle. I haven't set foot outside my 4.5 mat tatami room, and yet I've built some muscle. How about that? It must be thanks to destroying walls and the pseudo-Hindu squats that I've been doing to beat the blues. But how do you do a real Hindu squat? The ones I'm doing are just a pseudo version I invented based solely on my personal misconceptions, but they may very well be more effective than the real ones. When I get out of here, I should promote them as new Hindu squats. Day 30. I found something interesting in a room I passed through today. It was a Paulonia box, but inside was a scrub brush. I tested it out on the sink, and even though I didn't use any soap, all the grime came right off. It's an extremely high-performance scrub brush. I was only a momentary guest in the room, but I got so into it I scrubbed the sink until it shined. What an idiotic thing to do. Why are there differences between rooms like that? What causes them? It's the same with Kaori. At a glance, all the rooms are my room, so where do all these little differences come from? I don't have the interest or money to buy a love doll, and I had no idea a scrub brush of this insane caliber even existed. It's a mystery. Day 31. Rose at 3. Is it afternoon or night? Someone tell me. If you tell me, I'll give you 3,000 yen. Today I marched like crazy, but I should have chosen a direction. I think from now on, I'll quit breaking walls and go from door to window. I think he should mark each room, like from the very beginning, so he knows that he's not going in circles, like eventually. Although I'm sure after a while I'll get curious about what's on the other side of the walls again. When I took a nap, I had a dream. The Great Wall of China was cutting straight through the rooms. I must have been able to climb it so easily because I was dreaming. There was no way I could just step over the Great Wall of China. You can see it from space. But it was a dream, so I did. On the other side of the wall was Ozu enjoying some yakiniku. I was about to take a bite of beef tongue with salty green onion sauce when, to fuck with me, Ozu started eating every piece of meat I reached for. He ate even when the meat was still raw, so I didn't have a chance. Eventually, I woke up feeling frustrated. Freaking Ozu. The guy's a piece of shit, even in your dreams. But I sort of missed him in spite of myself. Oh God of tatami rooms, please give me meat. No, I won't make such an extravagant request. Grilled eggplant or a partially grilled green onion or even just yakiniku sauce would be fine. Day 34. Today I settled down early and cooked. I mashed up castella and simmered it with fish burger. That produced a strange flavor, but at least it was something new. Coffee is one thing I'll never tire of, but I wonder what kind of nutritional value it has. It's a critical question. That line of thought made me realize I haven't been getting enough vegetables, so I stuffed my face with vitamins. I want to eat something healthy. I want to eat some seaweed. I washed my hair in the sink and went to sleep. Why does washing your hair in cold water make you feel so heartbroken? I was so sad I could have collapsed in tears, maybe because it chills your spirits. Day 38. They say when you've been in an accident, you should stay where you are and wait for help, not move around. But how many people would be able to just sit and wait for someone to rescue them in this situation? If I don't move, I immediately run out of food. I'm a nomad who roams the tatami rooms looking for fish burgers and castella. There's nothing grand or free about it. And in the first place, who would be searching for me? How to even explain my circumstances right now? Is the world missing or am I? If I'm missing, then about a month has gone by in the world. June is over. I'm a man lost in time. The tatami room Urashima Taro. Except Urashima Taro got to chill at the Dragon Palace, so he had the better deal. I wonder whether my family is looking for me. I feel bad for my parents, but I bet Ozu has zero interest in trying to find me. He's probably making out with a cute underclassman like, yeah, I wonder where he went. I'm sure of it. I'm still mad at him for eating all the salty green onion beef tongue in my dream. Day 39. I thought about what to do if I can really never get out of here. As the pioneer of this tatami world, I'll have to bravely survive on my own. I'll come up with a diverse array of recipes using fish burger and castella, go into the mushroom cultivation business, and eventually demolish all the walls to build a bowling alley, a movie theater, an arcade, every kind of amusement facility to create utopia. Just the thought gets me excited. I should be excited, so what are these tears? During my intense travel adventure, the problem of food tormented me. I desperately wanted to eat some rice, even a convenience store onigiri. Cold and hard would be fine. I would trade 100 fish burgers for an onigiri. If someone put a bowl of freshly cooked rice in front of me, I would cry a waterfall. Watery co-op miso soup, soft-boiled eggs, rolled omelet, spinach ohitashi, grilled horse mackerel, braised burdock, natto, eel bowls, chicken and egg bowls, beef bowls, not chicken and egg bowls, rice with chicken and veggies, seaweed, yellowtail teriyaki, grilled salmon, crab omelet rice, ramen with grilled pork, udon with egg, soba with duck, gyoza with Chinese soup, karaage chicken, and of course yakiniku, curry, red bean rice, salad, cucumber dipped in miso, chilled tomato, honeydew, peaches, watermelon, pear, apple, grapes, satsuma, mandarins. It's entirely possible that I'll never eat any of them ever again. The thought made me want to eat them more. I seemed to spend day after day in agonizing pursuit of foods that didn't exist in the tatami world. What I missed the most was Neko Ramen. Neko Ramen is a ramen stand that is rumored to make its soup from cats. Regardless of whether that's true or not, the flavor is unparalleled. Thick noodles soaked in that soup with its mysterious depth. Back when I could leave whenever I felt like it, I could go out in the middle of the night for a bowl on a whim. That was what's known as paradise. The other thing I yearned for was a bath. My breast was tight with a desire to splash into a big public bath and soak. I remembered the old bathhouse in the neighborhood west of Shimogamo Hondori. I would go over there with a towel whenever the mood struck. In the early evening, I'd duck under the entry curtain and sit in the empty bath with a dopey, vacant look on my face. Paradise. The thought was so nostalgic, I couldn't stand it. There was one day I quit marching entirely and tried to construct a bath. I pulled a bunch of cardboard boxes out of the closet, dumped their contents out, and broke them down. Using that raw material, I spent 2 hours fashioning a bathtub. I knew how much water I could boil in my pot. I made the tub as flat as I could, so I would be able to soak as much of my body as possible, and then waterproofed it with layers of garbage bags. I boiled a pot of water and poured it into the bathtub. I did this over and over. Though I was able to experience the sensation of soaking in hot water, it cooled off right away. I couldn't soak my whole body, and folding my naked body up to fit in the crumpled, flimsy cardboard tub was a drag. What the hell am I doing, I thought, but there was no escape. Eventually the tub collapsed and the bath water drenched the 4.5 mat tatami room. Worst of all was that despite the fact that I put in all that work like an idiot, not a single soul made fun of me. If Ozu had been there, I'm sure he would have teased me to death. What are you doing? Is your neocortex riddled with maggots or something? I'm sure he would have said. One morning, the feeling of someone brushing my face with a duster woke me up. When I sat up, I saw there were tons of moths fluttering around the room. I was shocked. Usually there was just the one, but today it had invited a bunch of friends. More and more moths were pouring through the hole in the wall I had opened the previous day. When I peeked through the hole, the room next door was a dark frenzy of moths flying every which way, scattering their powdery scales. I grabbed my backpack in a panic, moved to the next room, and closed the window. Even if there's only one moth in each room, bunched up, they create a massive swarm. They must have been lonely. Once exchanges between 4.5 mat tatami rooms began to occur, the moths found compatriots for mutual support. Now they traveled from room to room, adding new friends along their way. It was enough to make me jealous. I sighed. They could get riled up over dirty jokes and fall madly in love, and others could even jeer at the ones getting riled up over dirty jokes and falling madly in love. Then there was me, who had to tell dirty jokes to myself, fantasize by myself, and then jeer at myself. How self-sufficient do you really want to be? Seeing my roommate moths having a glorious time together in the tatami world made me feel that much more isolated. Back to what happened to the previous fall. After fleeing the plot to abduct Kaori, I was lying low in my safe house, shaking in my boots. Since I had clearly expressed my will to rebel, I was sure Aijima would mobilize the library police to squash me. Jokasaki's fate would also be my own. My embarrassing secrets would be posted all over the campus bulletin boards. I'd be a laughing stock wherever I went, and before long, I'd be assaulted by thugs painted pink and dumped into Nanzenji's aqueduct. According to Ozu, Aijima was searching high and low for me. Aijima's a bit of an issue. He's borderline rampaging, you know, said Ozu. I was just thinking the printing office should do something. I didn't take one step outside the safe house. The safe house was the 4.5 mat tatami room of Seitaro Higuchi. from whom I had previously attempted to recover a library book. When Ozu suggested hiding out on the second floor of Shimogamo Yusu Iso, I didn't take him seriously at first. I was thinking I would make a clean escape from Kyoto and reach Satori on Cape Muroto and return an enlightened man. It's better to stay here than move when you might be detected. It's dark at the foot of a lighthouse, right? Ozu persuaded me to freeload at Higuchi's. I spent days on end playing a homemade version of Battleship with Higuchi. Ozu didn't come around for a while. Is it okay for me to be obsessing over Battleship like this when my life as a student is about to come to an end? As I sunk a sub with a gloomy expression on my face, Higuchi took out a cigar and consoled me in a happy-go-lucky tone. You can rest easy. I'm sure Ozu will take care of everything. He won't betray me? There is that possibility, he sounded amused. You never can tell with him. That's not funny. But he was being all heroic and saying he would defend you with his life. It's been almost 50 days since I strayed into this world. It's hard to believe. It must already be midsummer outside. For 1,200 hours, all I had put in my mouth was Costella, fish burger, daikon, vitamins, coffee, and whiskey. I hadn't even gotten any sun. I hadn't breathed any fresh air. I hadn't exchanged words with another human being. I had gotten sick of alchemy and wasn't even seriously collecting 1,000-yen notes anymore. I practically wanted to dump the backpack full of cash. What kind of world is this? What a world! The typography was tatami laid out to cover every corner. There was no night or day, no wind blowing, no rain falling. The only things illuminating the world were shabby fluorescent lights. With loneliness as my only friend, I continued to walk recklessly on towards the ends of the earth. I broke through countless walls, climbed up countless windowsills, and opened countless doors. Sometimes I stayed in one room for several days, reading, singing, and smoking cigarettes. I sulked, swearing I would never walk anywhere again because it was all pain and no gain. But staring up at the crappy ceiling for a whole day, wrapped in a silence that made it feel as though all humanity had perished, a terrible sadness presses in on you. I could develop dish after singularly strange dish using my limited ingredients, fold dozens and dozens of paper cranes and yako-san, humor Johnny, write, do push-ups, humor Johnny again, screw around firing a rubber band gun I made, and exhaust every other thing I could think of, but I couldn't forget reality. Good things come to those who wait. Since washing my hands of the organization the previous fall, I had stayed holed up in my 4.5 mat tatami castle. I thought I was a person who could tolerate isolation. That was silly of me. I was never isolated. Compared to the way I was now, I wasn't even a bit isolated back then. I was a precocious babe who wetted his toes at the end of the vast sea of solitude with a little splash and crowd, I'm so totally alone. I can't tolerate isolation. I have to do whatever it takes to get out of here. I unsteadily got to my feet and continued traversing the 4.5 mat tatami rooms. There's no one. I haven't exchanged a word with anyone. When was the last time I spoke to Ozu? With each passing day, it got harder to have hope as I walked. Climbing over windowsills became too much trouble. I no longer talked to myself. I didn't sing. I didn't wipe myself down. I didn't feel like eating fish burgers. No matter what, I'll just come out in the same 4.5 mat tatami room. It'll be the same no matter what. It'll be the same no matter what. It'll be the same scenery going on forever. All I did was murmur these things in my head. What happened the previous autumn while I lurked in Higuchi's 4.5 mat tatami room, absorbed in Battleship? Ozu engaged in yokai-esque secret maneuvers like a yokai. First, he took advantage of the vice head of the printing office attending a conference in Hokkaido to use his deputy authority to halt operations. That was the first time that had ever happened, so Aijima gave up on me and rushed to deal with the printing office. Ozu appeared before Aijima with the avaricious face of an unscrupulous salesman. I have questions about Lucky Cat Chinese Food's leadership. Someone appears to be plotting an insurrection, so I want you to hold a meeting. Aijima must never have suspected that Ozu wanted to take over the whole thing. While negotiating with Aijima, Ozu was also laying groundwork with the other organizations. He was good friends with a former member of the religious Mellow Softball Club, and that alum could exert latent power in other clubs, so that sped things up. The director of the school festival office was also Ozu's friend, and every last shady research association knew Ozu. In order to persuade them, he promised to divert a huge chunk of the library police's take of the printing office's revenue to the other clubs and associations. Using his connections from his library police days, he drew as many people over to his side as he could. As for the people he couldn't get on his side, he sent the Happy Bicycle Disposal Corps around and got them shut up in their houses on the day of the meeting. Gee, it could only be called an extraordinary display of diverse prowesses. The conspiracy invited Aijima in, surrounding him on all sides. The meeting was over the moment it began. The ignominious fact that Aijima had mobilized the library police to abduct Jogasaki's beloved over a personal grudge was exposed. After he was thrown out by the Happy Bicycle Disposal Corps, the meeting quietly continued. Ozu, why don't you do it? The representative from the Mellow Softball Club nominated Ozu. It's too much for me to handle, Ozu did pretend to beg off. In the end, it was decided that Ozu would be chief of library police and vice head of the printing office. The night Ozu was crowned chief of library police, I left my safe house for the first time in a week and cautiously set foot on campus. During the week I'd been hiding out, it had gotten a notch colder, and it seemed as though all the autumn leaves had fallen. I stole through the vicinity of the law facility under cover of night and slipped into the basement lecture hall where the meeting was to take place. I saw Ozu's coup succeed and how easily Aijima was thrown out. After the meeting concluded and the students dispersed, Ozu was sitting alone on the platform. I stayed where I was, sitting in the corner, and looked at his face. The lecture hall, with just the two of us in it, was cold and silent. Our breath froze white with each exhalation. I sensed none of the dignity befitting his imposing dual title. He still just had a weird Nurahihyon face. You are a force to be reckoned with, I said sentimentally, but Ozu just yawned. This is just a game, he said, but either way, you're off the hook now. We ducked out of the lecture hall and went to eat Neko ramen. It was my treat, of course. So it was that I washed my hands of Lucky Cat Chinese food and embarked on a voyage to a new world, or I should have anyways. It wasn't so easy to make up for the wasteful way I had spent the previous 2 years. I started spending more and more time holed up in Shimogamo Yusu Iso. I thought I should cut ties with this force to be reckoned with, but that didn't go very well either, because while I was shut up in my 4.5 mat tatami room, Ozu was the only one who came to visit me. Ozu was in the same year as me. Okay, this is how he's in electrical engineering, but he doesn't like electrical engineering. Okay, he hates vegetables, so he doesn't eat any, so he looks a little weird. He's selfish and arrogant, lazy. I wouldn't call him lazy. I mean, he's like going to all these different clubs and just like gaining connections here and there. He never studied. Okay. Blah, blah, blah. He's a horrible person, but he was my only friend, basically. I continued my pitiful march. One day, the 4.5 mat tatami room I was staying in had film stuff on the bookshelves. After we got to know Ozu a bit more, and we see some inconsistencies with how the main character sees Ozu versus how he actually acts. Like, he is not a lazy person. He might not study that much, but he's just going all over the place. The reason he doesn't study as much is because he's just going on all the fetch quests with his master and joining like tons and tons of clubs. So Ozu seems to like see socializing, gaining connections, and developing people skills much more valuable than his classes and studying. So yeah, I wouldn't call him lazy. He just has his priorities in different areas. Okay, one day the 4.5 mat tatami room I was staying in had film stuff on the bookshelves. Weird video cassettes I didn't own were stacked between the desk and the bookcase. Sipping coffee and smoking, I was digging through those videos when I found a tape that had "The Clash at Kamo Ohashi" written on it in a violent scribble. The label said "Ablutions." I found myself feeling interested, so I popped it into the VCR. It was an extremely bizarre movie. The only two actors were Ozu and me. It was a two-man show. It was about two men who inherited a prank battle with roots in the pre-Pacific War period. We learned that's where, like, Master Higuchi, the prank battle. Oh, it's all connecting. I forgot that's what one of their videos was about in the very first iteration of the universe. As they obliterated each other's pride with all the wit and strength they could muster, and it featured a bizarre performance by Ozu, his expression and unchanging as that of a no mask, overly energetic theatrics from me, plus all sorts of merciless pranks. During the finale, in which Ozu, his entire body dyed pink, like how he dyed Master Higuchi's yukata pink, and I, with half my head shaved, clashed on Kamo Ohashi. I couldn't help but hold my breath, but afterwards that made me feel pathetic. That's the kind of film it was. Seeing Ozu's face for the first time in 70 days or so was actually moving. I missed him terribly. At the end of the movie, there was a making of segment. Well, it was called that, but it was clearly staged. Ozu and I were having a meeting about the script on camera, building the drab set, and so on. There was also a lame segment called "How'd You Like It?" And it seemed like pretty much no one would tell us their impressions. Just one girl said, "You made another dumb movie, huh? Oh, it's Akashi." But no, I'd seen this girl somewhere before. "It's Akashi," I murmured. "Okay, used book fair, Akashi, Mochiguma, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea." During the summer of my sophomore year, I suddenly had the urge to get a part-time job. There was a bookstore called Gabi Shobo in Kawaramachi that happened to be seeking part-timers for the used book fair, so I applied. The owner, with a face reminiscent of simmered octopus, gruffly told me, "Just so you know, it pays practically nothing." My coworker at that job was Akashi. The owner was always gruff with me, but whenever he was talking to Akashi, he looked like the old bamboo cutter must have when he found Princess Kaguya. The gap between simmered octopus and old bamboo cutter was intense. The riding grounds stretching north to south along the approach to the shrine were crammed full of sellers' tents, and tons of people were strolling around on the hunt for books. No matter where I looked, I saw wooden shelves packed with books. It kind of made me dizzy. On the cloth-covered benches, set up in rows, people who must have gotten book fair sick like me hung their heads. It was muggy, but the buzz of cicadas provided a certain atmosphere. As I sat on the railing of the little bridge drinking ramoon during my break with nothing particularly on my mind, creeping around for that idiotic organization, the library police or whatever, started to feel really stupid. I saw Akashi multiple days in a row. Her short haircut must have kept her cool, and she had an intelligent brow. Her sharp eyes seemed to always be staring at something. I got the impression this hawk wasn't hiding her talons. Her job was mainly to look out for shoplifters, but any thief glared at with those eyes wouldn't have been able to touch a thing. In contrast to the brute strength she put into her stare, something awfully cute was dangling from her bag. It was a bear plushie made of spongy material. One evening after cleaning up, I saw her furiously kneading the bear with the serious look of a philosopher on her face. "What is that?" I asked. Her brows instantly relaxed and she smiled. "This is a mochiguma." Apparently she had 5 in different colors and that she lovingly called the fluffy Mochiguman Rangers. Mochiguma was a hard name to forget, but the smile on her face when she said this is a Mochiguma was even more unforgettable. As you may have already guessed, this is all to say that I fell for her right there and then. The evening before the final day of the fair, I found a Mochiguma next to the little bridge. Akashi had dropped it on her way home. I thought I would give it to her when I saw her the next day, so I took it with me. But on the last day, she didn't come. Something came up, so she had to cancel, the owner told me gruffly. I bought a copy of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea as a memento of the fair and left Shimogamo Shrine. I've been taking good care of the Mochiguma for the 6 months since then, always thinking that I needed to get back to Akashi. What a heavy blow it was when it disappeared at the laundromat. Oh, how vaguely long ago that was, I murmured as I watched Akashi on the TV. Seeing Akashi's face gave me some get up and go. The next day I began destroying walls and traveling again, but as I silently swung the wrench, I was thinking about that videotape. I had never made movies with Ozu, but that movie was made by Ozu and me. Reflecting on myself, I felt I did indeed have the dark impulses that could result in my making such a film. The tape had an ablutions label. I recalled memories from way back when I was a freshman standing in front of that fateful clock tower. Wasn't the name of one of the clubs I didn't join Ablutions? The way the rooms were all slightly different. Videotapes I didn't make. A bookcase lined with books I had failed to buy. A scrub brush I had never bought. Cowrie, who never should have been living with me. One day I stopped traveling. I stood in the middle of the 4.5 mat tatami room and looked up at the ceiling. I finally understood the makeup of these rooms. I was embarrassed that I hadn't noticed it sooner. The 4.5 mat tatami rooms endlessly lined up in this world were definitely mine, but each one of them belonged to a me who had made a different decision. These past weeks, I had been on a trip through the homes of my twins in parallel worlds. My whole body felt weak. There was no way to know what sort of order they were arranged in, and I had no idea why this world had appeared, and I had no idea why I had found myself lost in it. But I realized something. Even the tiniest little decision changed my fate. Every day I made countless decisions, which created infinite fates. They created infinite me's. They created infinite 4.5 mat tatami rooms. So on principle, this tatami world had no end. I was lying in bed, listening intently. The tatami world was ever so uninhabited and noiseless. There was no one to talk to. There was no one for me to tell anything to. I had no one to tell that to, and that me had no past and no future. There was no one to see me like this. There was no one to mock me, respect me, ignore me, or fall in love with me. There was no chance of such a person ever appearing. I was like dusty, stagnant air inside a 4.5 mat tatami room. No matter whether the world had gone missing or I had, from my perspective, I was the only one in existence. I had passed through hundreds of 4.5 mat tatami rooms, and I didn't manage to meet a single person. I had become the last person in the world. Is there any reason for the last person in the world to go on living? If I ever get out of here, there are so many things I want to do, I thought. I want to eat tasty food and slurp neko ramen. I want to go to Shijo Kawaramachi. I want to see movies. I want to argue with the simmered octopus face owner of Gabi Shobo. I guess it might also be fun to go to school and attend lectures. I could perform a dance for the gods at Shimogamo Shrine, and I could go up to the 2nd floor and indulge in smut talk with Higuchi. I could go for a checkup at Kabuzuka Dental and lick Hanuki's delicate fingers. I should go console poor Aijima about his outing from Lucky Cat. I wonder how everyone's doing. Are they having a good time in the world filled with life? Are they healthy? Is Jogasaki happy with Kaori? Is Ozu still fueling himself on other people's misfortunes? Is Akashi looking at her fluffy Mochi Gumin Rangers, minus one bear, wondering whatever to do? Or has she picked one up from somewhere she never would have expected? I want to find out, but none of those wishes would ever come true again. I felt something hard on my back. When I felt around for it, I realized it was the wisdom tooth I had pulled at Kabuzuka Dental. Mehehe, I laughed, a dangerous laugh even for me. I put the cavity-ridden tooth on my palm and rolled it around. Why is this thing here? This was, Tatami Room 0. It was my starting point. I don't know where I went wrong, but somehow, after weeks and weeks, I had ended up back in the room where I started. I must have been making a desperate little circle in one tiny corner of this infinite world. The 4.5 mat tatami rooms in this world weren't all identical. They reflected across doors and windows, so when proceeding, it was probably possible to mistake your direction and go the opposite way. My intention had been to choose my directions carefully, but my execution was imperfect. What an utterly fruitless runaround that was, I thought, but I was already in the pit of despair, so I didn't feel much. I quietly accepted the situation. I lay in bed stroking my long beard. I should just resign myself to settling down in this world. I need to forget my beautiful memories of the outside. I'll stop breaking down walls like a barbarian and lead a gentleman's life, keeping regular hours. I'll read good books, weaving in some erotica when appropriate, and put all my energy into cultivating my mind. If I can never leave this boundlessly vast Zashiki prison, then I'll wait with dignity to die upon the tatami. That's what I was thinking as I fell asleep. It was the 79th day. I woke up. The clock said 6, but it wasn't clear whether it was 6 in the morning or 6 in the evening. I thought about it as I lay there, but I wasn't sure how long I had slept. Squirming like an insect on top of my futon, I sluggishly got up. It was quiet. After a cup of coffee and a cigarette, I still didn't feel like getting the day started, so I flopped back onto my futon and sunk into thought. I picked up the holy wisdom tooth lying near my pillow. Holding the sinister cavity up to the light, I thought about what the fortune teller in Hiyamachi had said. I had concluded that my incomprehensible circumstances were entirely her fault. She sweet-talked me with lines like, "You seem to be extremely hardworking and talented," and my desire to escape into the life I could have and should have had pushed me towards her. She put a 4.5 mat tatami curse on me. Colosio. Ridiculous. I no longer even had any need for that rose-colored, meaningful campus life. Such a supremely great treasure should be locked up in Shosoin. Still, what a tremendous cavity. I can't believe I put up with it for so long. The top of the tooth looked like it had been gouged out. The way you could see the inside made me feel like a science class model. As I stared at it, it stopped looking like a tooth and seemed more like a giant building from ancient Rome. "Colosio," I murmured. I heard a sound like something bumping against the half-open window. Oh, was it the moths? In the next moment, something like a squirming black wind came pouring through the gap, flooding the 4.5 mat tatami room. Apparently, the giant swarm of moths traveling this tatami world happened to be passing through room number 0. A multiple of moths coated the ceiling. Still, they continued to stream in. Panicking, I decided to make a hasty escape into room 1. When I opened the door, I got a face full of chilly hallway air. The sticky, dusty hallway stretched darkly out. There were light bulbs at intervals along the ceiling flickering. Way over by the entrance, a fluorescent light was cheerlessly shining white. I set off for the entrance. I paid no mind to the moths streaming out of my open door. Something was making a little puffing noise in the corner of the hallway. Someone must have been using the outlet in the corridor to cook their rice. The lure of freshly cooked rice nearly pinned me on the spot, but I made a point of not stopping. When I opened the shoe cubby, my shoes were inside, as they should have been. I left Shimogamo Iso and wandered into the twilight of Shimogamo Izumi Kawacho. Indigo dusk hung over the neighborhood. The cool breeze blowing through the alleys caressed my cheeks. The smell was incomparably good. It wasn't just a single scent, it was the smell of outside. It was the smell of the world. It wasn't just scents, I could hear the world's sounds. The rustling of Tadasu no Mori, the burbling of the brick, the sound of a motorbike racing through the twilight. I passed through Izumikawacho on unsteady feet. The hard asphalt went on forever. I could see street lights, house lights, warm glows shining through windows. I passed Shimogamo Sario, casting its light on everyone coming and going. Then I walked the approach to Shimogamo Shrine, quietly lined with houses. Eventually I heard the sound of passing cars and students making a racket on the Kamo River Delta. I could see the delta's dark pine grove. I could see college kids having a party in the twilight. I crossed the road and went into the delta. I passed through the pine trees on the embankment. I could hardly contain my emotions and fairly ran. I knocked on the trunks of trees as I raced by. I shoved ecstatic college kids out of the way. They looked at me with what the fuck faces, but when they saw me with my long hair and beard, they pretended not to notice me. When I made it through the trees, the clear, indigo sky opened up beautifully overhead. I practically tumbled down the embankment and ran to the tip of the delta. The sound of the water swelled. Like the captain of a ship standing at the bow, I planted my feet on the delta's tip. The Takano River from the east and the Kamo River from the west mingled before my eyes to become one Kamo River and flow south. In the lights reflecting here and there, the surface of the water looked like a sheet of metallic paper being waved like a stage prop. Before my eyes lay Kamo Ohashi. The lamps in a well-mannered row along its railing cast an orangey glow, and shining cars crisscrossed without end. All sorts of people walked over the bridge. All sorts of people were hanging around the Kamo River Delta. No matter where I looked, there were crowds of people. The lamps on the railing, Keihan Demachi Yanagi Station gleaming bright white, the rows of street lamps, the lights of the Shijo neighborhood down the river, the headlights of the cars going over the bridge, everything sparkled like jewels, so beautiful and then blurred. What in the world? There's so much life. It was as busy as Gion Matsuri. I filled my lungs with the fragrant air, looked up at the sky going from pink to indigo, and grimaced. Then I let out a roar, but I'm not sure what that was about. Bathed in the fearful and disgusted gazes of the other people milling about on the delta, I was rapturous with the joy of being alive in this place. I don't know how long I was in that trance, but eventually there was a disturbance on Kamo Ohashi. Looking up from the tip of the delta, I saw a ton of students closing in from either end of the bridge, cheering and clamoring. What's this fuss about, I wondered. As I watched, a man stood up on the bridge's thick railing. He seemed to be arguing with the students closing in on him. When I looked at his face, illuminated in the railing's lamps, I saw it was Ozu. He was standing on the railing, making like he was about to jump, smirking, striking vulgar poses, and so on. Even after 80 days, he still had that impudent yokai face of his. Even while I was gone, he seemed to have continued charging down his cursed path. The wave of nostalgia was so strong that I called out to him, "Ozu!" but he didn't seem to notice. What kind of idiotic nonsense is he up to, standing on the railing like that? Is it some kind of festival? As I was wondering what was going on, a shriek shot up behind me. I turned around to find the area of the pine grove on the embankment submerged in a black fog. Okay, here come the moths. And within the black fog was a muddle of young people. They were half mad, flailing their arms and ripping out their hair. The black fog spread eerily and seemed to be heading straight for the tip of the delta where I was. Black fog poured continuously from out of the pine grove. This was nothing to sniff at. With a trembling, fluttering, rustling, and flapping, the wriggling black fog flowed over the embankment like a carpet and swept over the delta's tip. It was a swarm of moths. A news item appeared in the next day's Kyoto Shimbun, but no one knew exactly why the extraordinary number of moths had appeared. Retracing their flight path, they seemed to come from Tadasu no Mori, that is, Shimogamo Shrine, but this wasn't clear. Even if every moth that lived in Tadasu no Mori had decided to migrate all at once, there wasn't a good reason for it. Apart from the official explanation, there were rumors that the moths had come not for Shimogamo Shrine, but the neighborhood next to it, Shimogamo Izumi Kawacho, but that only made the story even stranger. Apparently, it was the area right around my apartment that had been flooded with moths and thrown into an uproar. When I returned to my room that night, there were dead moths strewn throughout the hallway. My door was half open, as I had forgotten to lock it, so there were moth corpses all over my room too. I gave them a respectful burial. For those of you who have read this far, the mystery is probably no mystery at all. This is what I think. In the Tatami world, I traveled for 80 days. Oh, it's like around the world in 80 days. Swarms of moths seemed to gather here and there. One of those swarms must have poured from the Tatami world into this world through my 4.5 mat tatami room. Buffeted by the swarm of moths as they flapped into my face, sprinkling their scales around, sometimes trying to force their way into my mouth, I bravely stood my ground on the delta's tip. That huge swarm of moths, though, was beyond the realm of common sense. The awful sound of their beating wings cut us. Is he gonna protect Akashi? Well, let's read on, because this is the last iteration, so even if we've read the parts of this before, I'm gonna keep reading. It was less like moths and more like little winged yokai passing by. I couldn't see much of anything. Through the slits in my barely opened eyes, I could make out the gleaming water of the Kamo River, the railing of Kamo Ohashi, and someone falling off the railing into the Kamo River. When the swarm had finally gone, the Kamo River Delta was filled with voices chattering about what a frightful experience that had been, but I stared at the river in silence. There was something like dark, dirty seaweed clumped around one of Kamo Ohashi's feet. Isn't that Ozu? Students crowded around the railing, yelling, "He really fell! Holy shit, holy shit! Save him! He can die for all I care! This guy won't die even if you kill him!" The river was running high, but I waded into the flow. Nearly losing my footing a number of times, I rushed to where Ozu was. I hadn't bathed in so long. I think it actually cleaned me up. When I finally reached the foot of the bridge, I asked, "Are you okay?" Ozu stared me in the face and said, Sorry, who are you again?" It's me. He squinted for a few moments, but then finally seemed to get it. "But what's with the Robinson Crusoe beard?" I had a rough time. You're not the only one." "Can you move?" I asked. Ow. I guess not. This is definitely broken." "Come on, let's at least get to the bank." "Ow, it hurts. Don't move it." Part of the restless crowd on the bridge came down to help. "We'll carry him. You get that end. I'll take this end." They seemed to know what they were doing and were very efficient. Ow, be more gentle, please," Ozu made extravagant demands as he was carried to dry land. There were a ton of people milling around from Kamo Ohashi to the west bank of the Kamo River. It was a total uproar. I freaked out when I thought I spotted Aijima in the crowd, but there was nothing to be afraid of anymore. The group that formed crowded around Ozu, who was being rolled like a log along the riverbed. Higuchi made a leisurely appearance and asked, "What about an ambulance?" to no one in particular. Jogasaki told him. Akashi called one. "It'll be here soon." Honuki was there next to Higuchi, looking down at Ozu as he groaned. "You really do reap what you sow," she said. Lying on the dark riverbed, Ozu moaned, It hurts, it really hurts. Do something." Higuchi knelt next to Ozu. "I failed," Ozu said in a small voice. "You're quite the promising disciple," Ozu said Higuchi. "Thank you, master. But there was no need to go breaking bones. You're an incorrigible idiot." Ozu cried softly. Some haughty faces came out of the group of people encircling Ozu at a distance and began talking among themselves. "Ozu won't escape, rest assured." Higuchi snapped. "You can hold me accountable." It took about 5 minutes for the ambulance to arrive at the end of Kamo Ohashi. Jogasaki ran up the bank and came down with the medical techs. The techs wrapped Ozu in a blanket and loaded him onto a stretcher with skills pros could be proud of. It would have been hilarious if they had just thrown him into the river like that, but emergency workers were admirable individuals who sympathized with all injured people equally. Ozu was packed onto the ambulance with a gravity disproportionate to his nasty ways. I'll go with Ozu, said Higuchi, and he and Hanuki both boarded the ambulance. So what happened where I couldn't see it? The events that led to Ozu being cornered on the bridge are exceedingly complex, and the details would be an entire story in themselves, so I'm going to keep this brief. Higuchi and Jogasaki had been prolonging a mysterious fight called the masochistic proxy war for some time. That May, when Higuchi got his yukata dyed pink, he ordered his henchman Ozu to take revenge. To get back at Jogasaki, Ozu stole Kaori, copying what Aijima had done the previous fall. He had been planning to leave Kaori with me, but since I was out, he gave her to Executive A from the library police. But A all too easily gave in to the temptation of improper conduct with Kaori and attempted to flee Kyoto, which is when things started to get out of hand. Ozu tapped his library police subordinates in a personal capacity, went after A in a rental car to stop him, and took back Kaori for a while. But as soon as it came out that Ozu had mobilized the organization for personal reasons, the clubs, research associations, and so on, who were dissatisfied with the vice head of the printing office and chief of library police dominating Lucky Cat Chinese food, leapt at this chance. In their pay, the Happy Bicycle Disposal Squad occupied the printing office and library police headquarters. Okay, that was a mouthful. During all of this, it had come to light that Ozu had been diverting printing office revenue to buy food and drink for Higuchi. Oh, so they were plotting to capture Ozu and recover the stolen amount. When Aijima, who had been waiting for a chance to get revenge on Ozu, sensed that his downfall was nigh, he apparently attempted to exchange custody of Ozu for his position in Lucky Cat Chinese back. He ran the underclassmen and the film club ablutions around to root him out. The night of the incident, Ozu was on his way home when he most sensitively detected danger, so instead of going back to his apartment, he hid beneath the eaves of a house in Jodoji, contacted Hanuki from his cell phone, and requested a rescue from Higuchi through her. So it was that Akashi, with orders to save Ozu, slipped into the Jodoji area. The area around Ozu's building in Jodoji all the way to Kinkakuji had an encirclement 10 to 20 layers deep, but Akashi came up with the idea to go through the Lake Biwa Canal so Ozu was able to slip by, evading the surveillance crisscrossing the area east of the Kamo River and north of Muratamachi Dori like infrared sensors. Ozu, having been cross-dressed by Akashi, went over the Tadekurabashi Bridge and reached Shimogamo Yusuiso. He was laying low in Higuchi's room when Jogasaki, furious over the theft of Kaori, inconveniently barged in. After being kicked into the street, Ozu was discovered by some associates of Lucky Cat Chinese food patrolling the area. Though he was fortunate to be able to escape from clusters of associates time after time using his inborn speediness, he was finally cornered on Kamo Ohashi, and having nowhere else to run, he jumped onto the railing. He stood firm with the arrogant face of a Tengu. "Keep threatening me and I'll jump. If you don't guarantee my safety, I'm not coming down there." After that, he fell off the bridge into the Kamo River and broke his leg. Once Ozu had been taken away, everyone left the riverbed like a tide going out. I went from 80 days of being completely alone to getting tangled up in this hubbub, so I just stroked my beard in a daze for a while. While I was looking around the riverbed absent-mindedly, I spotted a girl sitting on a bench. Her brow was furrowed, and she had her hands covering her pale cheeks. I went over to her. "Hey, are you okay?" I asked, and she put on a wan smile. "I really can't handle moths." "I see," I thought. They were a whole lot of people making a racket. What was that about? Ozu, ugh, it's so complicated I can't even really explain it. "You know Ozu?" I asked. "Yes, I take it you do too?" "Yeah, we go back." I introduced myself. I told her how I had lived on the first floor of Shimogamo Yusuiso and had been hanging around with Ozu since freshman year. Were you by any chance in the library police, she said. You're the seahorse incident guy, aren't you? Seahorse incident? Master Higuchi said he wanted a pet seahorse, so Ozu got him an aquarium, but the moment he filled it, it broke. Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, that really screwed me over. But apparently Master Higuchi never got his seahorse. Why not? I asked. It was taking so long that he decided he wanted a giant squid instead. Gosh. Don't think you could fit that inside an aquarium. Right, so even Ozu couldn't help him. I heard that instead he bought a Ferrari flag to distract him. She rubbed her pale cheeks. Why don't we get some tea or something to calm down, I suggested. It's not as if I was thinking anything so rude as stooping to using her weakness against moths to my advantage. Seeing her so pale, I was offering out of concern. I walked to the nearest vending machine and bought 2 hot coffees, which we drank together. By the way, are the mochi gumen doing well, I asked. Yes, but I lost one, she said, and then pursed her lips. She looked into my eyes, and then she looked as if she understood. You worked at Gabi Shobu during the used book fair, right? Sorry I didn't recognize you. You remember? Yes, I remember you, but that's one magnificent beard you've got, she said, staring at my face. There's really no reason to speak at length about the feelings I had at that moment. Suffice to say, after a fierce struggle to connect those feelings to action, I managed to spit out the following line. Akashi, want to go get some neko ramen? We ate our ramen. I cried a river that overwhelmed even the owner. It was my first neko ramen in 80 days. It's that good? Akashi asked. I moaned. That's wonderful, she nodded softly and slurped her noodles. So that's my Around the Tatami Galaxy in 80 Days story. I wasn't about to sleep in a 4.5 mat tatami room ever again, so for a while, starting that night, I slept in the hall. Then I found a new room in Moto Tanaka and promptly moved there. This time I chose a 6-mat room with its own bathroom and everything. That said, I sometimes catch myself going to pee in a beer bottle, and I recall those horrible 80 days. The strange thing was that I wandered the tatami world for so long, and yet in reality no time had passed at all. It was less like being spirited away and more like a dream of prosperity. But it wasn't a dream. The swarm of moths, the unruly beard, and the backpack full of 1,000-yen notes were proof of that. That backpack paid my moving expenses. How my relationship with Akashi developed after that is a deviation from the point of this manuscript. Therefore, I shall refrain from writing the charming, bashfully giddy details. You probably don't want to pour your time down the drain, reading such detestable drivel anyway. There's nothing so worthless to speak of as a love mature. It's not fair for you to assume that I naively approve of my past just because there have been some new developments in my student life lately. I'm not the kind of man who would be so readily affirm his past mistakes. Certainly I considered giving myself a big loving embrace, but regardless of how it would go with a black-haired maiden of a tender age, who would have any interest in hugging a mess of a 20-something guy? Driven by that inescapable anger, I firmly refused to give my past self salvation. I can't shake the feeling that I never should have chosen the secret organization Lucky Cat Chinese at the foot of that fateful clock tower. If I had taken a different path, I would have had a very different couple of years. But actually, given the impression I got wandering the tatami world for 80 days, perhaps they wouldn't have been so different after all. Above all, a terrifying thought. It seems that no matter which path I chose, I would have met Ozu. I guess it's just as Ozu says, we really are connected by the black thread of fate. So I'm not going to give my past self a big hug, and I'm not going to validate my past mistakes, but I'm not opposed to overlooking them. Ozu stayed in the hospital next to the school for a little while. I have to say, it felt pretty great to see him strapped into a crisp white bed. He always had such a terrible complexion that he looked like a patient with an untreatable illness, but it was just a broken bone. I suppose it's lucky that he got away with just a broken bone. He grumbled that he wasn't able to perpetrate any of the misdeeds he preferred over 3 square meals a day, but I just thought that's what you get. When his grumbles got to be too much, I crammed the castella I brought him into his mouth to shut him up. Higuchi, Jogasaki, Hanuki, plus his friends and the underclassmen from the film club, his friends from the softball club, the director of the school festival office, izakaya managers, the owner of Neko Ramen, and tons of people affiliated with Lucky Cat Chinese food formed an unending stream of visitors. I was surprised to see that even Aijima showed up. There were Lucky Cat Chinese food members guarding his room every day to make sure he didn't try to escape. One day while Akashi and I were there with Ozu chatting, a neat, clean woman came bearing homemade lunch. Ozu got strangely flustered. Is it Ozu's girlfriend? Ozu got strangely flustered and told us to leave. Outside his room, Akashi laughed impishly. Who was that? I asked. Kohinata. She quit the film club Ozu and I are in, but she's been going out with Ozu since freshman year. Wait a minute, Ozu has a girlfriend? He's so busy causing trouble. It's a wonder he has time to date, Akashi joked. He hates introducing Kohinata to other people. I think because he's on his best behavior when she's around. I glanced down the hospital's hallway. There was a guy at the payphone holding the receiver, pointlessly inserting a 10-yen coin and taking it out again. I recognized his profile. I was sure he was one of the executives who had gone to abduct Kaori with me back during my library police days. When he noticed I was staring at him, he hurriedly hung up the receiver and disappeared into the shadows. I sighed. Akashi, I think Ozu has too many enemies. He needs to lie low for a while. Yeah, she grinned. I can't help with that. Oh, I can help with that. Leave it to me. Ozu had been my sole friend for the past 2 years, so I offered unsparing assistance given his difficult situation. Even once you're out of the hospital, you're going to be in a world of trouble. That's as plain as the nose on my face. So until things calm down, run away somewhere. I'll cover the costs. Ozu looked at me suspiciously. What's your real motive? You can't fool me. You should learn to trust people once in a while. I'm not the only generous person out there. Plus, do you even have any money? Like you're one to talk. Whatever, just let me pay. Why do you want to pay so badly? I grinned. Oh, it's my love language. Gross, you can spare me, he replied. Oh, it's backwards than the last one. I really like this book. I like the Around the World in 80 Days reference, where it's around the world like the tatami mat world, which seems to represent his mindset. So he was able to get a glimpse into all the different universes and realize, he can't just be stuck in the past worrying, oh, if only I did this differently, things would have been so much better. He realized that, we make decisions based off of who we are in the moment and what we think is best or what feels good in the moment. So he would have kept making the same mistakes over and over, and he actually realizes that, and he realizes, oh, well, now that I've learned from, my bad behavior and learned from these negative experiences, I can now live in the present. So when he escaped the giant tatami mat world, he was so in the present. And usually he's always like stuck in the past, but he was like suddenly in the present, like enjoying the life and the people and the air and enjoying the small things that he overlooked in the past and overlooked in all the other universes, where it's like now he can appreciate life for what it is instead of being grumpy and like trashing Ozu all the time. Like finally he was nice to Ozu, even though he admits that Ozu was his only friend for 2 years. And it seems like Ozu was his only friend for 2 years because, Ozu's not one to look down on people for, know, kind of being a loser. Ozu kind of has a bit of a loser vibe, but he's still out and interacting with people and being sociable. So even though he is very, he can be imposing at time when he brought Kaori over unannounced. But yeah, I feel like there's that term hikomori, where you get like stuck in your own house or your own room and you don't leave. The main character seemed to become one in the last iteration, and he had the battle of his own mind trying to break out and appreciate the world outside his apartment. I liked when he said, when I had the option to go out, I didn't want to go out. But now, when I didn't have the option to like go outside, suddenly that's like the only thing he could think of. So yeah, I really liked this. The main character, he felt like an actual real person, and we really got to know him throughout the book. And we got to know Ozu throughout the book too. And, both characters have good and bad things about themselves, but you also feel hopeful for both of their future. Like, I feel like the main character learned a really good lesson about himself and about life through all his experiences. And, he does have, with all the times I called him a jerk throughout this book, he does have good moments, like when he took care of the cat, when he had self-control, when Hanuki was drunk, and he wanted to be a respectful gentleman around Kaori, and even facing death, being stuck in the tatami room, he decided, yeah, I want to live like a noble life. Maybe I can improve myself while I'm stuck here, instead of just wallowing in despair and getting all grumpy and just staying mad for the rest of his life. He actually started to think about different solutions and breaking down walls and being very like consistently every day he wanted to like break walls down for a while. And he had moments of rest, which is good. So he seemed to learn a lot in the 80 days in the tatami rooms. So yeah, I really liked this book. So this does say it's an anime. It's an anime series, at least here. So maybe I should watch it. I haven't watched any anime in like forever, but yeah, I'm kind of interested to see how they convert the novel, since most of this is like internal dialogue from the main character. I am curious how they translate that into an anime, especially, the main character, he seems rather introverted, so I have seen, trying to turn introverted characters into like movie or TV series. It doesn't translate super well. It translates okay, but it can be difficult to translate it in an interesting way that keeps the audience's attention. So yeah, I want to check that out. But yeah, whoever wrote this was really good, and whoever translated it did a really good job too. All the words flowed really smoothly. I could picture what was going on really well, and yeah, the character descriptions were great, especially with the main character. He just seems so well-rounded and like a real person. So that's the Tatami Galaxy. Thanks for reading with me. See you next time. Bye. So one more thing, I was just looking at the book, and you know how there's like 4 bears on the cover? In the book, it describes that there's always a 5th one, so I was just like looking around the cover art to see like where the 5th bear is, and it was described as gray, and I thought, oh, well, maybe it's this one, but they definitely said there was 5 bears. But if you look in the back here, here's the missing bear, the one that went on an adventure through different realities. So, and also the author. So he was born in 1979. He was born and raised in Nara Prefecture, Japan. After debuting in 2003, his first novel, Tower of the Sun, which he wrote while studying at Kyoto University, won the 15th Japan Fantasy Novel Award. In 2007, Morimi received the Yamamoto Shugoro Prize for The Night is Short, Walk On Girl, and in 2010, Penguin Highway was awarded the Japan SF Grand Prize. Several of his works have been adapted into critically acclaimed anime series and films. So that's pretty cool. I should read some of his other books since I enjoyed this one so much. So that's it. Okay, bye.